Everyone, welcome to the conversation today. So glad to have you here with us and looking forward to diving into what's happening in hiring, what's happening in the recruiting space, what's happening with the candidates out there. It's a different kind of world. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation, looking forward to sharing with you. And today I have with me my co-host, as always. So glad to have him here. Going to bring him up on screen. George Rogers, everybody's favorite person, mine especially. Welcome, George. Good to have you.
Man, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you once again for allowing me to join. Man, I'm excited about these great speakers. I'm excited to see your handsome face, and I'm glad that you made it back, man. I know that you had a crazy 24 hours the last few trips.
Yes, absolutely. So for everybody else, I want to talk about that a little bit today. We'll get into that in just a second. I want to do a quick couple of housekeeping things. Things everyone wants to know about credits and that fun stuff. And then I want to share with George for a little bit. I'll share the agenda with you if you haven't seen it already, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So let's go ahead first and share a couple of quick housekeeping things, just things that you need to know for this conversation today. Number one, chime in, be active, get in the chat, say hello, let us know where you're connecting in from. As we're going through, ask questions, share with each other, talk about what your challenges are, because this gives us a chance to learn from each other, but it also gives us a chance to support and encourage each other as well. And that's what George and I have George as my primary encourager in life. He told me yesterday, he said, hey, whatever you're doing, just like stop for 30 seconds and just breathe and calm down a little bit, because he knew that I was probably in the throes of things. So chime in. We've got some fun giveaways. I can't find the one right here next to my desk. It's been here for a couple of days. Someone rearranged it while I was out of the office for the last couple of days, but I'll find it during a break and show it to you. One of our speakers today during the first session, Trent has an amazing book called Sprint Recruiting, about weaving some agile principles into the recruiting process. And so that'll be tremendous. I have some of these fun notebooks. I'm redoing this one, so if you can't read it, it's HR Coffee Repeat. I'm working on some that are recruiting Coffee Repeat. If you prefer to be the recruiter title, so we have some of those notebooks to give away. It's just I like to take notes on things. We all do in the space. I think that's a requirement if you work in HR. You got to keep a lot of lists and everything else. So that's just a fun thing to show off how awesome you are, and a couple other things as we go through. There's another speaker who has a book. We'll get to that in a little bit. Also, credits, everyone wants to know. We'll send the details out after the event. If you catch the live stream today and you didn't register for the event, if you're watching this on a replay later on, so if someone shared it, make sure you go to the link at the bottom of the screen and register so that you can get the credit information once the event's over with. We'll make sure and share that out with everybody. Okay. One last thing. Thank you so much to the sponsors who made the event possible. Chronify, Modern Hire. We'll hear from some of their teams today about how they're supporting the world, how they're helping employers to find the right people, how they're helping us to make a better, predictable hiring experience, but also a better candidate experience overall, really connecting with our people. So it's going to be a tremendous and fun conversation. Really looking forward to it. Agenda. How about we tell you what you're going to see overall today? That sound fair, George?
Yeah, let's rock it. Let's rock it.
All right. So we're going to do a couple of opening announcements, some fun back and forth with me and George, and then we're going to dive into a great conversation, a keynote panel with Kelly and Trent, both of them VPs of talent at large organizations, and talk about what they're doing, how they're facing the world, what their challenges are. You're going to really enjoy that one. Lots of good takeaways. We give them some extra time because there are just so many good pieces of information in that discussion. We're going to stop and give away some stuff because we like to do that. George likes to give away my stuff, and I like to give away my stuff, so it'll be fun. And then we'll go into using science to be more consistent in picking the right high performers for organizations, looking at hiring differently. Some Peter Cersei's with the FBI. He's going to be here in the chat today at some point. Some great ideas from how he is approaching hiring and how he's changed some of their things. And so we'll go into those, and we'll talk about the rest of the agenda for the day in a little while. But that's the first part of what we can expect. And so let's drop that one off. Because George, I told you, I wanted to tell you what I was doing this last weekend, and because I felt like it had a connection to the audience. And if anyone saw my post on LinkedIn this morning, you kind of got a little teaser of that. I just last night, about 12 hours ago, got back from Guatemala, where I've been for the last few days before that, doing a short-term mission trip, working with a bunch of young adults that are transitioning out of school and trying to get their first jobs. And so it was, here's how you prepare your resume. Here's how you interview. Here's how you carry yourself and things like that. And I'm educating them, trying to tell them how to connect with employers, how to do that. And it hit me that some of the things we'll hear today from the employer side are the same things I was telling them. You got to know your story. You got to know why this is important to you. You got to know how to connect with the right culture that's going to be the set of values that you believe in. And George, I know you talk a lot about those things in the work that you do and in the writing that you do. You talk about the importance of those kind of things, about being true to yourself and having some courage. And like that matters on their side. But I think it also matters on the employer side as we're looking for the right kind of people and trying to make sure that we're not just getting anybody in, but the right people in.
Right. I think that's important, is hiring the right people. That is so key, because oftentimes we feel like the right people look like us, or the right people like us. When the reality is that the worst thing that you can do is build a bunch of people that are just like you. You need that diversity, not just in color and race, but you need diversity in the skill set. You need that in the not just in the ethnicity, but you also need that in the thought, diversity in thought, how you think towards certain things. Because if you have the same group of people thinking the same way, you're just going to run circles and not have that creativity. Or if you're trying to scale and grow as a company and you're all thinking the same, who's that one person that can think outside the box? It's so important when you say hire the right person, that it's not the like person, and it's not the like me person, or right for me person. It's the right for where we want to go. Is so key, in my opinion.
That's one of the challenges I actually have when as a recruiter, in my time in the seat. So everybody out there, that Ben doesn't just talk about it, Ben did it at one time. And so I actually started with in one of my HR jobs. It was my first time to have recruiting as part of my role. I'm thinking, please give me an accountant, or an admin or something simple to start with. And they gave me a requisition for a Black Hawk helicopter instructor pilot. Oh gosh. So I learned, trial by fire, how to do hard, really tough technical sourcing and things like that. But I completely agree with you, George. I'm coming back to, it was always a challenge for me to get hiring managers to accept those things. Sometimes it's not you were saying those words a minute ago, like it wasn't maybe the comfortable hire, because sometimes those people are going to challenge what we believe. And we'll hear that from some of the speakers today. We need to have the credibility, the courage, you can probably come up with a better word on how to have a conversation with our leaders inside the business about, hey, you know what, we've been doing this, we should be doing that. And here's why we need to make that change.
Yeah. Change, something that I thought about, even you said change, and I always jump on that word, because change is so valuable. Like everything that you said, I had something in my mind, and the moment you ended with change, the only thing that I can come up with is change must first start with your mind, right? It must. Then from your mind, it's like a combination. Your mind and your heart, it's got to be the first place of change before you can ever change within your team, the workplace, the culture, your hiring processes, right? Any type of system and process within a company, wherever there is change, if it does not first impact your mind and your heart, it is just going to be a tool that eventually you will go back to your nature of reaction and action, right? But if it's a mind change and it's a heart change, it's easy to do that. And I always say this is that, man, everybody loves change. I love change. This is one of my favorite seasons of change. I love the fall, not because the trees are dying, but the view, right? I'm a nature guy. I like to be outside and walking and enjoying, the view and the perspective of, mountains and things of that nature. And I love change, but with change, some things die, some things grow, and some things stand still. But everybody loves change except when it changes them. So let all these systems, let the hiring change, let all these different things change around me, as long as it doesn't have to change me, right? Don't mess up my agenda. Don't mess up my comfort zone. But as a team and as a company, in order for your culture to be impacted when you're trying to hire the right people, is that you got to be able to be influenced by change, not just by the people that's on your team, but by that person that's going to hire you. I've been changed more, not by my executive staff, not by some of my business partners. I've been changed more by my team members that are actually the techs and the managers, the sales reps. I've been changed more by them because of their perspective. more than I have been impacted most of the time by those who are, the upper class, the C-level staff leaders. You got to be able to be impacted and be willing to change by all. And that starts even with the janitor.
Oh, goodness. I love one of the things that you said that triggered me. You said you kind of skipped over this, but I expect you to leap on it. You can't be passionate about everything, I guess. But you said you got to change your mind. You mentioned kind of like heart, like you got to change your heart. And a lot of change comes from there. When you, for example, when I believe so fully in what we're doing as an organization, I can't wait to tell everybody about that, because it is the coolest thing that I've ever done as a job. And I can't wait to tell everybody else about it, because I'm believing it so fully, not just with my head, but with my heart. Those conversations, people would tell me back when I was like, recruiters don't talk like this. Like, this is a different kind of conversation. Because I'm like, it's because I'm not selling you anything. I'm just telling you about it because I love it. And by the way, if you think you might love it too, great. But I'm just telling you about it because I love it. So that's so exciting for me. One reason for everybody else out there, right, for your benefit, and I've been, it's so much fun seeing everybody coming in, Paul and Paige and Michael and Stacy and all the dozens of people who are already chatting. Welcome. We're so glad to have you with us today. One of the things that I'm thinking I want to tell them is I have you here with us, not only as my resident culture and leadership expert, but also because you have experience as the hiring manager. And many of us, even if we're in HR and recruiting, we always say, well, I'm in charge of hiring. We're not ultimately responsible for hiring. Most of the time, it's a hiring manager who's in charge of those things. So I wanted you here today, as we're going through, as we're recapping the sessions, as we're discussing what works, what doesn't work. I want you to have that perspective for us, just like you talked about earlier, that diversity perspective, because you can bring that and say, hey, you know what? Here's how I want you to approach me. Here's how you should be sharing that. Here's what I expect in a turnaround time, or those kinds of things. We're going to hold you accountable too. We're going to pick on hiring managers in this. Don't you worry. But I also want you to bring that perspective as we're going through and talk about what you need from us, because that's always been this point of friction that I've always seen. Sometimes there's a good relationship there, but sometimes it feels like we're on different planets, and it'd be nice to bring those things together, especially right now when things are so difficult. That could be the secret sauce to really solving for some of those challenges people are seeing.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I'm excited, especially for some of these great speakers. I got a little bit of tease of some of the sessions and everything. So I'm excited about those things. One thing that I want to just end on, when we talked about as you were talking about the heart thing, I start thinking, man, the heart does two things, right? It pumps in and it pumps out, right? And there's a flow there. There's a flow of the heart. And I think in every company, that flow is with hiring managers. You got to be able to know what's coming in and what's going out, and make those decisions, not in some long-term phase. You got to be quick, because there's a couple of people that you'll find those A candidates, right? Those top of the line big, and you think that you found them. The reality is, I've never hired a great person. A great person has always found me, right? It made the decision easy. But when you're coming to those other people, you got to be able to be quick and decisive. And that happens with the heart. The heart matters. And that's why it's so important to understand, what are we flowing in? Where are we going? And what do we need to get there? What's flowing out? And I call it coaching people out of my business. I don't like to fire people, but I like to coach them out, because I want them to pursue their goals. And everybody has a time and a season.
Wow. I think if we cut the feed right now and there was nothing else today, and remember that someone is hiring you as an employer, you're not just hiring them. If there was nothing else, just flipping the script on that a little bit, I think that would be incredible. That's why I have you here with me, George. Like, you're the king of one-liners, and I'm so excited to have you here with me today. So everybody, looking forward to some great discussions, some great conversations. We're going to go ahead and kick it off with our first session. So we have Kelly and Trent. They're going to talk about, from a leadership perspective, what they're seeing in the market, how they're approaching it, how they're facing it, and was so much fun. If you were here with us for HR Summer School this previous summer, you heard from Trent during one of the sessions, and this person is the most focused on data and numbers and analytics like anybody I've ever met. But when it came time for him to talk about what it takes to be successful in talent acquisition, he talked about courage and vulnerability and these things. I'm like, that's not what I expected you to say. So you'll hear some of those things today. It's funny, because I've been telling people this conversation, I think it's going to go this way, and it ends up going that way because of just their perspectives on things. So George, we're going to we're going to step back. We're going to bring them forward and look forward to hearing and getting some good insights as we're going. Please chime in the chat. Tell us what you love. We'll be sharing some of your comments and things as we go through, as always, and we'll pick in some people in just a little while to win some of those prizes. Stay tuned. Here it comes. Hey, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here at this incredible event. We're going to hear from some amazing leaders today, and especially in the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to be talking with a couple of TA leaders that I highly respect. And we're going to understand what they're doing, what they're seeing, what they're facing. So they're in the trenches with all of you right now. And so I'm hoping to get some encouragement, some ideas, some inspiration, all that from this next little bit. Not to put you too back on your heels there, but lots of stuff going to come out of this conversation. I'm so glad to have you here, Kelly from Lineage Logistics and Trent from Bureau Veritas. Glad to have both of you here with us.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before we dive into some of the fun stuff, Kelly, would you be willing to go first and give the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure, no problem. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning. I am currently the Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition for Lineage Logistics. We're number one in cold storage worldwide. If you haven't heard of us, our overall purpose is to transform the food supply chain and eliminate waste and subsequently feed the world. So some big shoes to fill. And I'm actually fortunate enough to lead the global talent acquisition function that supports the purpose for 380 locations in about 17 different countries worldwide. People first leader with a passion for helping organizations win by designing and really executing strategies that help us win this fun situation that we all find ourselves in terms of market challenges. And over the last 19 years, I've spent a lot of time in different spaces, whether they be early stage startups, high growth mode organizations, acquisitions, or new directions in the marketplace. Love this space. I spent 3 years with Disrupt HR Chicago, kind of leading the charge with two other fabulous people, Nicole Desane and Nancy Harris, and ran a nonprofit group that was really designed to engage, inform, and empower people within the HR field. And currently I sit on an artificial intelligence talent community building board called Wells that helps just kind of feed the funnel that we're finding ourselves in today. So thank you.
Wonderful. So glad to have you here and looking forward to learning from you as we go along. Trent,
Thank you.
How about you?
Trent Cotton with Bureau Veritas. We are the global leader in the testing, inspection, and certification space. So everything from the food label you probably looked at some point today, to the safety of your car, to a lot in the oil and gas, sustainability. And, Kelly, we probably do a lot of testing and inspection and certifying of some of the work that you do. So
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that we're both on the kind of in the same industry by proxy. But I'm in charge of talent acquisition, retention, and insights, and also kind of keep my hands a little bit in employer branding as well. So I'm a little bit more popular than I care to be right now. I haven't been as popular since high school, just with the growth that we're doing and trying to lead a transformation of the TA side, and also to how we look at analytics as an institution.
Awesome. And you undersell yourself, but Trent has an amazing book. We're going to give away some copies of it today at the event. So the book's on sprint recruiting and how to be more agile in your practices. So we'll give away a couple copies of that to some people that are very engaged in the chat. So stay tuned, ask questions, chime in.
Yes.
We want to hear from you. We'd love to hear your take on these things as we go through, everybody. So connect with us. All right. So I'm just going to kind of open it up because Kelly, a few minutes ago, used the word fun to describe the world that we're in right now, and a little tongue in cheek there, maybe. But I'd love to start off with you, Kelly. Tell us what you're seeing. Tell us your perspective on kind of what's happening in the world right now from a hiring perspective.
Oh, everything's great. What are you talking about? It's the easiest market we've ever worked in. My take is, honestly, all kidding aside, we're going to be here for a while. Government subsidies, changes to unemployment have made small marginal changes to job seeker behavior, which I'm sure you can all relate to. I think we can all agree it's going to be a long road. I will say this, though. This is going to probably be our new norm, but as a lot of the people that are probably listening today, recruitment and the landscape of recruitment continually evolves, right? So this is just kind of our new our new normal, and we need to evolve with it. So in terms of what we're seeing and just in general, the market challenges that we're seeing, I think we can all agree they're very similar. Talent shortages, market shortages, compensation questions, market saturation, government subsidies, unemployment issues, and just a nervousness and a concern around wanting to change positions during a global pandemic, which continues to rage on, I think is where all of us from a TA perspective are trying to get our arms around how to approach that problem. But I don't see it going away anytime soon. So it's definitely a problem we need to take a closer look at solving for.
And Trent, I know one of the things, probably music to your ears, because I know you and I have talked about, you like looking at the big macro picture, what's happening in the world and the economy and, across the spectrum, and use that to influence. It's not just what's happening in your narrow lens inside your organization. And some of those things Kelly was mentioning probably are top of mind for you too, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, we did, we do monthly manager reviews. So MMRs is what we call them. And with each of the different lines of business. And that's been the theme for this week. And part of what I deliver as the TA leader is not just what are we doing, as an organization, what are the recruiting metrics and all that, is I try to bring in some of that external economic data. And I had two charts on one of the slides. The left one showed over time, over the last 10 years, the average number of open jobs per applicant that's out there. And then next to it, I had the workforce participation rate, and both of them looked a little bit like an EKG if it was in cardiac arrest. It's like all over the place. But what was, being the nerd, last night I kind of looked and I was like, there's a pattern here. So I took the two and flipped them and put them on top of each other, and they were like directly proportional. And I just like my mind just started going through. It was like, okay, so if this is going on, it was like this, if this, then that, then how do we do this? And how do we do that? That's the part to me that I like. But I think what's really interesting though, is that the pandemic accelerated conversations that needed to be had over the last 7 to 10 years. I mean, it forced companies' hands. So everything from, it is absolutely, I'm trying to think of the right diplomatic word, not political, but to me it is such a farce to think that you can pay someone $7.75 to do general labor and that they can live off of that, but that's how it's been for 5 or 6 years. People were kind of, we need to raise it a little bit. But now with the pandemic, companies are looking and going, we got to pay for the talent. So, one of the jobs that, whenever I first started, I think it was like $11 an hour, and now we're like up to 20 in the span of 8 months. We've had to make those market corrections. So, does it cause a lot of stress for us? Yes. Does it make us, like Kelly said, does it kind of force evolution? Yes. And I am not opposed to any of those. I just wish the speed would slow down just a little bit. If we could take it down a couple of notches so I could breathe, sleep, just some of the major things. But I think that the pandemic, being the optimist, has really forced TA, as well as the organizations that we serve, to really look at talent for what it really is and start pricing it the way that it should be valued. And Ben, I think that you actually shared something with me not too long ago about, where did the companies focus? What, 5 years ago was on revenues and sales and this and that, and then looking at the last 5 or 6 months, and talent was at the bottom 5 years ago. Now talent is at the top, and then the rest of it. And so I think that, the pandemic has forced companies to really look and say, okay, talent is not an expense. It is an asset that helps us get those revenues, those sales, and then bottom line GP.
Yeah. It's not an incidental,
no,
incidental piece to the business. It is the business.
It is the business. Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite quotes, I actually think it's in the book that I wrote because it was so powerful to me, is companies don't hire people, people hire people.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
There's not a single logo out there that will go and just do the work for you. It's us as recruiting leaders and our teams that are out there pounding the pavement virtually or possibly in person these days, trying to get in contact with the candidates and trying to make those connections. And people want to work with people that they like, and so we're trying to figure out how to make those kind of things happen. Kelly, I'd love to hear from you. Trent talked about comp and other levers they're trying to pull to try to make this a little more palatable, or make this a little more this puzzle a little more solvable, possibly, if it is solvable. I'd love to hear from you some of the things that you and the team at Lineage are doing to try to solve for this, because again, all kidding aside, it's not something we can snap our fingers and just do this one thing and suddenly it's all going to be great. There's a lot of different things we can do. And what I want everybody else that's listening to this right now to walk away from today is to say, I've got 3 or 4 ideas on things we can also try and try to solve for their piece of this, if you don't mind sharing.
100%. And Trent, you bring up a lot of points, the people first methodology and the whole philosophical approach of how it has shifted so much to bottom line, to really having an emphasis and everyone understanding the necessary component that talent and people provide. Instead of saying things like, I need a butt in the seat, a very different approach of making sure we've got the right individuals in the right roles for the right positions has been a very big shift, I think, overall, and really emphasizing the need in this, wow, when the market turns and we don't have people, what a dramatic impact it has. And so some of the things that Lineage has really been focused on, and this has been a focus since I've started, just in terms of, number one, we've really taken a concerted effort on retention. So there's so much of an emphasis on filling a rec, but I think the stats are off the charts in terms of what it costs from a turnover perspective, the impact on your morale when you've got so much turnover within a particular group. So turnover and retention are 2 levers that we've really spent a good deal of time on. And some things we've done, some really small things. It sounds really silly, but talk to the people that you work with. We focus so much on these big, huge things that we need to do, but really focusing on having conversations, spending more time, getting to the root of why people are leaving, asking people, doing exit interviews, doing stay interviews, doing focus groups, talking to individuals about what they're seeing on the floor. Do they like working with their manager? We do surveys with our new hires that ask them, how many times have you spoken to your manager? How many times have you had time to spend with them? And it really gives us a look at areas that we need to tighten up or button up. So just as much as there's an emphasis on getting recs filled, there needs to be an overemphasis on retention and turnover and kind of getting to the root of why some of those people are leaving. We've done all the same things that most companies have done in terms of compensation, but we've really tried to look at it from, I would probably say, peeling back the layer and not just looking at it through the lens of compensation, but looking at it from total rewards. So what are some things that some of our competitors do that we need to be ahead of? Competitors that are coming into our space, our market may look very different in Allentown, Pennsylvania than it looks in Mira Loma, California. So how do we become a little bit more competitive there? It might be something as simple as free lunch Friday. It might be something larger like burning our benefit period, but we've taken a very close look at, what gets to the root of people's pain and makes that go away. A big thing for us, and another one that was talked about a lot on the recent Gartner webinar, was around, your employee value proposition and how your job descriptions are posted and, removing your bias. So we've done all of those things as well. But I think the big thing for Lineage and the big thing we've been trying to stay focused on is our EVP. As I mentioned, our purpose is to eliminate waste in order to feed the world. And I think, as much as it sounds like a very lofty goal, if people can get really excited and engaged in that type of mission and that type of purpose statement, people feel very connected to who we are, what we do, and it just creates a much more engaged employee, and then a lesser chance that people leave. So we're really trying to focus on what we do, how we do it, why we do it, which is very different, as you all know, you're Simon Sinek lovers. The why is really important in terms of creating that threshold to get people engaged and want them to stay. So those are some of the things we've done. Obviously, we've done some other things too, but hopefully that paints a picture for how important the people aspect is for us here at Lineage.
I love that, by the way. And one of the things you mentioned EVP. I don't know if you mentioned the full name, but for anybody out there that doesn't know, it's employer value proposition, right? That's not just here's a job, we're trading you hours for dollars, but here's what we want to do in the world. Here's what we want to impact. And here's our, she used purpose, right? So those other kind of words there that a lot of the research shows connects with someone's willingness to stay in a job and willingness to be attracted to a certain company. So when she mentioned EVP, for those of you out there that haven't thought about it at that higher level, a little more strategically, that's a great suggestion for you to think about. How are you marketing yourself to to your candidate audiences. And I know, Trent, you mentioned that you dabbled in the employer brand stuff. I know you love data, you love those kind of things. But I'll tell you something. I don't think I've ever told you this. You and I have been friends for a while now. When I first heard you say that your job title was talent acquisition and retention, I was thinking that's brilliant. I've never met someone that actually has that as their focal point, kind of bridging those gaps. And so we heard some of the ideas from Kelly and things. Anything else you'd like to add about how you're thinking about this, how you're solving for this? Because I think there's a lot of different, again, tools that we have in our tool belt, and people just, it's easy to say, okay, well, the dollars aren't there, we need to pay more. And you mentioned an example already where you're trying to solve for that. But what other sorts of tools do you have that you're kind of pulling out of the tool belt?
I'm actually going to tag on a little bit to what Kelly was talking about. I'm bringing my team in both countries together for an offsite soon. And we're going to have just a session on brand positioning, because I think what a lot of recruiters do is, hey, Ben, I've got this warehouse worker position. It pays this amount, blah, blah, blah. I mean, then you're competing on price. And anybody that's heard me speak knows that, my background was in banking, and I never competed on the rate, because if you competed on the rate, then the client would leave as soon as the rate changed. And the same applies for talent. If I get you on for $14.75 and then Amazon comes in and offers you, $14.85, you might leave. But, if we can position the brand, so for us, we want to leave our mark in the world. We want to provide safety from everything from farm to table to, the cars. I mean, there's this huge value prop that we do. So I always like to do this exercise, and I've done it before. It's just kind of a quick little story. What I do is I kind of get them in a room and say, you have $100, and I need your help, because there's this bench at Notre Dame, and it's a little wooden bench, and I show a picture of the wooden bench and say it's on the walkways, but the school wants to get rid of it because it's 15 years old and it's kind of in the way. How much money can you give me? And a lot of times it's like $5, $10, but then I change it and say, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit more about this bench. This bench is in memory of an 18-year-old young woman who lost her battle against osteosarcoma, and her dream was to go to Notre Dame. And, just kind of tell the story. And it's someone that I know, someone that was like a sister to me. And then I stop at the end and I say, okay, now I need some money to help me tell Notre Dame that we don't need to move that bench, because whenever I see that bench, I see inspiration for life. I see perseverance. I see love. I see all of this stuff. And I want the world to be able to see that and let that be a marker for students as they walk on the walkways, that they know Carrie's story. 9 times out of 10, everybody's like $100, $100, $100. And I said, that's the difference. The first is just a wooden bench, but whenever you truly paint what your EVP is, it goes from a lonely wooden bench that, I don't care, I wouldn't even give any money, like, go on with it. But then whenever you give it that story and you give it that life, and I always end with, even a lonely bench sitting on a walkway, whenever you tell a story, it has a meaning, and so does our brand. And so that to me is a competitive edge. If you truly believe in what you work with and what you're working for and what you're working toward, people want to be a part of something like that, And so, yeah, Amazon may come and offer them $15.50, but where am I going to be in Amazon? What is it doing? It's just, helping people buy more storage space. It's I want to be a part of something that has, its roots in sustainability, its roots in safety, and I want to be proud of who I work for. So I guess my advice for the TA leaders trying to motivate your TA team to, maybe you can't compete on price, but maybe you can compete on the vision. Get your recruiters to stop selling a wooden bench and get them to start telling the story behind the bench.
You can't see the chill bumps, right? But when you're telling that story, I'm getting chills over here.
Agreed.
That's powerful, but storytelling is a critical part of
Huge.
how we do our jobs, a critical skill, but we sometimes forget that there are applications for that beyond just selling an idea inside the business. Now you're selling this opportunity to someone else. And if you're in recruiting and you don't truly believe that it's a real opportunity, you're like, I'm just got to fill another job. Maybe we can find another role for you somewhere else, because you've got to see this as a real opportunity for someone. The way I always used to put it when I was recruiting was, when we never had like a 24-hour window for someone to get back to us on an offer, because I said, I want you to commit a part of your life to us that you'll never get back.
Right.
If you come and work for us, that's going to be a part of your life that we can't, there's no refund. So I want you to feel comfortable with this. I want you to ask every question. I want you to be as prepared as you can be to make this decision, because we want you all in, and I want to be all in on your, with you on this. And so that was all. People were like, wow, that's different. Usually it's, hurry up, give me your answer after we drug this process out for 6 weeks. Like, hurry up, give me the answer. No. This is the time for you to really decide, is this the right thing for you? Because I don't want this to be as you said, this is the transactional thing. The next transactional experience, the moment it comes through, I'll just jump on that. And I never wanted that to be kind of the way people looked at it.
Yeah. I mean, hell, Ben, whenever I'm recruiting, I lead with the brand. I lead with our story for the first 15, 20 minutes. And I've actually had people go, oh, that's fantastic. Wait, what job are we talking about? I was like, oh, well, we can talk about the job. That's whenever I know, I'm like, okay, I've got you. I can move you from, executive over here to executive over here, or maybe another position, because if we lead with the brand and then we ask that individual and say, okay, tell me about your experience as it relates to kind of our story. I'm evaluating them for their involvement, and I'm being able to evaluate, okay, is this person in line with our EVP? But then on the offer side, I remind them of the vision, but then I also spend a lot of time talking them out of the job. And I extended an offer about 90 days ago. And whenever I was going through the offer, and I was like, but where you are, you've got this and you've got this, and the candidate actually stopped and go, are you trying to talk me out of the offer? I said, no, I'm beating you to the devil's advocate. I want to kind of help you do it. And I mean, he was a salesperson. He goes, so you're pulling the sales thing? I was like, yeah, I am. I said, but let's just kind of go through it anyway. Because for me, especially on the TA team, whenever I extend offers to join our team, I say, when your feet hit the floor, I want you to be excited about the work that we do. Now, yes, exhausted because it seems like you're pushing a rock up a hill and it rolls right back down, but I need you to be energized, right? And I think that's a conversation. The one thing that I would advise that I would give to leaders, whether it's TA, HR, or across the board, is do those check-ins with your team. How are you feeling? Are you burnt out? I was on late last night answering a couple of emails. Now, I left, went and did my 2-hour workout. I came back and I was just catching on stuff as I was cooking. And I caught 3 or 4 of the team members on there, and I went to our group chat and I said, I'm going to pretend that I don't see 3 of our team members on at 8 o'clock at night, my time. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. I know who you are. Sign off now. And, everybody kind of went, ha, ha, ha. But I wanted them to understand, I need you refreshed. I need you to spend time with your family. Okay. To kind of create that balance. So I think that's something that TA leaders were having to do a lot more than we have pre-pandemic. And then the other lever, I'm going to hit on feedback since you brought it up, Ben. It is one of the 4 principles in Sprint. It is one of the things that I spend the most time hammering down on. 48 hours, you talk to a candidate, give us feedback, especially in this market. You may not be able to compete on price, but you can damn sure, be able to speed the market. So they may be interviewing. In fact, somebody on our team was interviewing with 3 other companies. I moved her through the process in 4 days because I wanted her that bad. And, that's all I had. They probably could have offered more money, but I got to her first. So hammering in on the feedback, selling that EVP, and then checking in with your team. Those are the 3 pieces of advice that I would give to kind of navigate through this really, really, really tough time.
What's one of the interesting things, I want the audience out there to know this, by the way. I gave them some big ideas we're going to talk about, but I didn't prep them. They didn't know what the other one was going to say. And you heard at the very beginning, before Trent said anything, Kelly said, here's what our company does, and here's the mission we have, and here's the problem we're trying to solve in the bigger world. We're not just moving things from here to there and keeping cool. We're trying to solve for this hunger piece. And so I think you were laying that out earlier, Kelly, like from the start. One of the questions I want to ask you, kind of bouncing off of what Trent was saying, is I know you've been plugged in. You mentioned earlier, like volunteering, other kinds of things you're doing outside of your work bubble that keep you sharp and probably keep you energized. And I want you to give some encouragement out there to the audience, because Trent talked about kind of self-care, making sure we're putting our mask on first, whatever metaphor you want to use. What advice would you give to the leaders out there? Now is the most challenging and high pressure time we've ever seen in the hiring space. What should they be doing to make sure their cup is full so they can pour into others and support others at work?
Good question. I think one of the things is to talk to other people that are in the same boat. There's nothing that goes further than empathy. I had a conversation with Trent a few weeks back, and we swim in a very similar space. We have some of the same market challenges, and it was so reassuring to hear some of the things he was doing. We could share best practices, tips and tricks. I think oftentimes in the TA world, we consider ourselves competitors. We don't want to share our secret sauce. And I think we need to come together much more effectively and just be vulnerable and share what we're struggling with and ask questions. And Trent gave me some great ideas that we put into motion rather quickly. So I think it's being vulnerable, asking questions, working with other people. I do think the whole notion, Trent, that you mentioned about your recruiters working till all hours of the night. You mentioned the 8 p.m. piece. This is the craziest environment that I've seen in terms of market need for recruiters, and not just a recruiter, but a good one. And they're being pulled and recruited and pushed, and every job is the most important. And I think it's repurposing some of the time during the day to put an emphasis on, a 10-minute yoga break, or, what have you done today to rest your mind? Have you read a recent book that you want to share? And I think from a day-to-day perspective, we as leaders also need to make sure that we're taking breaks with our team and forcing the things like shutting down. Recruiters will come back and say, I can't, then I'm way behind for the next day. Great. Let's prioritize. Let's talk through what you're stressed out about. Let's reprioritize your day, because it's never going to stop. We're going to be in this position for a long time, and burnout's a real thing. But I do agree with you, Trent, in a lot of the things you've said in terms of the EVP, leading with your brand. If you can create that stickiness, people feel much more centered, and they're much more loyal and much more willing to go the distance. And those are the ones that you have to be careful about, because those are the ones that burn out. I was like looking you up on Venmo as you were talking to try to send you money for the bench. So, I think as leaders, we need to make sure that we stay together and we share what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. And Trent and I and others, we try to get together. I try to hold a monthly session with people from everywhere, from a recruiting coordinator to, the chief people officer. Let's come together and talk about what things are working and what's not working, and try to figure out how we can employ those best practices overall.
She said my favorite word, prioritization, but we're not going to do a detour on the whole sprint recruiting.
I was going to rein you back in if I had to, Trent.
Yeah. But I could plug our boot
your
camp
favorite
coming.
word, and I saw you kind of start bouncing in
I
your chair.
was like, ooh, feedback, prioritization. I love it. Love it. Yeah, but
use the word vulnerability, Trent. And I was going to ask you about that, because I had heard you speak earlier this year, and you talked about being authentic and vulnerable. And usually when you think about someone who's the head of TA, they are like hard charging, leaning in, numbers, data, which you are, but you also use words. When I've heard you talk about your style in the past, like, I'm very vulnerable with these other leaders, because I want to be open to them, want them to be comfortable coming to me when they have questions and stuff. And I'd love for you to talk for a second, if you don't mind, about the importance of vulnerability in the work that you do, and just being open and authentic about the kind of things that you're facing. You gave a good example a minute ago about telling your team, like, hey, I see what you're doing, and I'm trying to encourage you to not do that right now. I want you to make sure you're taking care of yourself. But what other ways does that vulnerability piece come into play when you're leading and you're running a team and you're interfacing with the other stakeholders and clients, as you call them?
So we'll talk just real quick, about the team. I make it a point in the chat sometimes, like on a Friday or Wednesday, just depending on the week. Sometimes it moves, but there would be times where I hit the team at 4 o'clock my time, and I've got team across 4 different time zones, and I go, team, I'm brain dead. I have nothing left to give. I'm out for the day. I'll check in with you tomorrow. Not a lot of leaders would do that. They would feel the need to be the last one, the first one in, last one off. I want them to understand that even I understand my limits. I can work another 2 hours, or I can spend that 2 hours being more refreshed and coming into the day, the following day, with just a renewed energy, a renewed focus, and I'm going to be 10 times more productive taking that 2 hour rest. So I need to be vulnerable enough to set that standard. And then with the clients, I gave the example a little bit earlier about our MMRs and showing the charts and all of that. And, on several of them, I said, look, I know that all of you are going, okay, well, what does this tell us? I don't know. I've never seen anything like this, and just telling them, I am navigating this just as much as you are, but here's what we need to do. We need to be creative. We need to test things. Let's do it in a sprint format. Let's try and test this idea over here for 2 weeks. If it works, great. If it doesn't, scrap it. We'll try something else. So I use that vulnerability of saying, I've never seen a market like this. I mean, you and I talk often about the data stuff, and I mean, it's just like some of the stuff that like you present, I'm going, oh, this is this, you know, oh, it's males that do that. And then I look at the data and I was like, wait, females do that? Interesting. When did that change? I mean, it's such a trying market. I think leading with sometimes, I don't know, allows you're going to have some candidates that go, well, you should know you're getting paid for all of that. You know, that's 20%. The 80%, the vast majority of the leaders, they want to hear that. And then what I've experienced is that a lot of leaders go, I'm just perplexed. You know, we've done this and we've done that. And it totally takes all the walls down so that we can work as hiring partners to figure out how are we going to forge ahead and how creative can we be and what exposure. The other aspect I know that you probably were hinting at, Ben, is, you know, I went from banking, healthcare, tech, that was kind of my background, into TIC, which I didn't even know what TIC was, testing, inspection, and certification. A lot of times I think leaders and recruiters, they feel like they need to know everything about what they're doing. For me, I always love to ask the Genesis question of going, okay, why is this position important? Where is it in the value chain and in the revenue chain? So that way I can understand the importance, you know, of it. And I think asking those questions, a lot of times recruiters think that the managers think that they're dumb. It's not the case. Every time I've had that, the manager sees me as being engaged, and it establishes some credibility with them. Because there are times that I'll call, you know, and I'm working on a couple of searches, and, you know, I'll call the executive and go, I like this person, but I'm 50-50 on whether or not they're qualified, because they said a whole bunch of stuff. I wrote it down, but I don't know what the heck it was. Can you kind of walk me through it? And then I asked them, okay, well, what is this? Okay, is that good or is that bad? And it's a temperature check, and it's a consultative aspect of it. So that lead with that vulnerability, you know, Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors, and she talks about leading with vulnerability with your team, with your clients, and even, you know, within your family, and just watch the transformation. I mean, it's been a journey for me, because I always like to have the answers and, you know, all this other kind of stuff. So it was really hard transition for me, but now I find it so incredibly comfortable, and I learned so much more about my partners. Like, you find out human things about them. They're not just the hiring manager. You know, you get to see their humanity, and to me, that helps me be able to recruit for them a hell of a lot better.
Right, 100%. You can sell them too. You know, you're talking to a candidate, and you're talking about how that person was vulnerable, what they did, what they said. It just creates so much more excitement that the person, you've humanized the whole experience. People get very excited to know that the person they're going to be working with has those characteristics, because I think COVID, the whole global pandemic, really made us think differently about a lot of things. And I think that humanistic approach, not only the EVP brand, but who you're working for and what they do and why they do certain things, is critically important when people are making a decision to change positions. 100%.
And you know, whenever I'm hiring for HR, and I'm not sucking up to my CHRO Maggie. I mean, I've worked with her for 17 years. She knows. So anybody that's like, oh, he's sucking up to you, she's not going to believe you, because she knows different. But it's so easy to sell her for me, because I made a huge jump, and a lot of it was because of the credibility and the trust that I had with her. I didn't trust the market because I didn't know what was going on in the market. I didn't trust the industry because I didn't even know what the industry was, but I trusted her. And we had very heart-to-heart conversations that said, okay, what do you want me to do? You understand, you know me, Maggie. I'm going to break things. Are you okay with it? Will you give me the cover fire that I need to? And when she said yes, I believed her. And whenever I go and I'm trying to maybe recruit someone for HR, I lead with our brand, but then I talk about the leader. And I said, I'm not just saying this because I work for her. You know, I'm saying this because I made a huge move that was very uncomfortable because of her and her leadership. Now, whenever you come over here, it is not all roses and everything. We will work you like a dog. But the difference is, whenever I go to sleep at night, I'm exhausted, but I'm also excited because I've moved the needle. And a lot of that is because of the leadership that our CEO, my COOs that I support from a client side, and our CHRO, they give us the leeway to be able to run our business and do what we need to do. And that kind of a company, that's a company I work for every single solitary day. And then I start telling them about the HR role that, you know, I want to recruit them for. But by that point, they're like, I'm in. You want me, you know, I was a payroll administrator. I'll go to be a payroll clerk, you know, and that's the fun part of recruiting, is selling that vision and getting them so involved in it I think we've gotten away from it, especially with the pandemic of, let's just get a cheek in the seat. I think we need to get back to it.
I agree.
Cheek in the seat.
A cheek in the seat is what I call it.
Never heard that one. I'll have to remember that.
That's the polite version, Ben. That's the polite
back
version.
for a minute, or maybe 15 minutes ago. One of the things that we touched on very briefly was comp, right? Adjusting that and trying to solve for that. And for some of the leaders I talked to are like, okay, we know we've got to do something, but we don't know what that is. Do you have any advice for how someone can start to get a finger on the pulse to figure that out? Is it using actual salary data? Is it asking candidates what offers they're getting and using that as your yardstick? How do they know what to adjust, how much to adjust to try to hit those things? I know we're coming from all this like really leadership and kind of soft stuff and into this like really specific practical question, but it's one of the things I was looking back through my notes from listening to both of you for the last 30 minutes or so. And that's one of the things we talked about that I hear everybody saying, okay, we're going to try to pull that lever in addition to these other meaningfulness and purpose, meaning, those kinds of things. But any advice on how to solve for that or start to get a handle on some of the comp pieces of that?
I can jump in with two. So we'll use a company as a baseline that everyone knows, loves, and is kind of a trademark. And then I'll tell you about some of the tools that I use personally. The first is Netflix. And if you have not read the book No Rules Rule by Reid Hoffman, and it's an unbelievable book. And it just pulls back the curtain of how Netflix transformed over time. And it's very, very HR specific. It's all about their talent. So one of their rules is that anytime a recruiter calls the employee, they want the employee to take it. And the employee goes in, they'll ask for the job description, they ask for the comp, and they go in and they put it in this database. So it's user-driven, crowdsourced. And what the organization does is at kind of the top of the house is they start looking. And if they realize that the developer job is going from $75,000 average with X number of years of salary to now 95, they go in preemptively and move everyone. That's why it's so incredibly hard to snatch somebody out of Netflix, because they are, to me, it's so counterintuitive, especially now. I mean, if you take every recruiter call, I mean, business leaders would have acid reflux, out the wazoo, because, we got to retain them. But if we tell our employees, hey, we want to make sure that we're competitive in the market and we need your help, and then they see that we move them fairly, very quickly to keep them in the market. You want to talk about a retention? Oh my God, that's unreal. So that's Netflix. Netflix, a little gold standard. I think there's definitely some stuff that all TA leaders can try to do to emulate that. But I use a particular tool that's our sourcing tool. That's AI and machine learning driven. It goes across 750 different platforms to find talent. But once I build out that search and it shows me a couple of the candidates, I can go and look at market insights, and it pulls in that salary data from Indeed and Glassdoor and a couple of other different resources. So when we do an intake with the manager, part of it is we're showing off the tool and we're making sure that we're on the right track from a search. But then we switch to the insight and say, hey, you're paying $50,000, but if you look at the bell curve, you're to the left of the bell curve, and we never want to be to the left of the bell curve. So we need to either regrade this position or reposition this position in terms of qualifications, and you have it on the onset. It helps with the search. It also kind of puts you in a position to be in a lot more consultative.
Yeah, you touched on quite a few things, and I'm happy to report. So some of the things you said were making me smile, but from some of the things Netflix did, we did the same thing. So in terms of, there's nothing worse than sitting in a role, seeing that exact same role posted for the company you work for, paying more than what you're earning. And so, in terms of our recruitment marketing campaigns, instead of taking that approach where it was, hey, we need to get these positions filled, we actually started with, again, the people first, and took a comprehensive approach of looking across the board, evaluating data from Mercer, looking at talent supply reports, looking at Talent Neuron as a tool, taking all of that information, packaging it up, and then going after our current employees from an equity perspective, right sizing them, making sure we were competitive. So we did that kind of as step one. Step two, same thing. We went across the board to key areas, market dynamics, looked at some of our competitors that were coming in, and we didn't look at the competitive recruitment advertising. We looked at the real data. So, as talent acquisition leaders, probably every other day you're getting a text of a flyer that someone saw with these exorbitant sign-on bonuses or something someone was doing across the street. So we take those insights and that data as well to help us fill the funnel for how we approach market challenges. But a lot of that was predicated on the fact of whether it be Mercer or Talent Neuron to kind of pull and quantify what we were doing and how we were going to market with our salaries. And we were really focused on the EVP in terms of why people want to work here, our foundation that we've recently stood up, and then a lot about, how we transform things and whether it be our data or what we're doing in terms of data disruption, because everyone thinks, oh, it's just cold storage, but there's so much more to us from that. So we led with those values and then backed it in with total compensation, which was evaluated with those sources that I just mentioned. So very similar.
And Kelly, I think those resources are fantastic. Just one caution for TA leaders: use that as a portion of the toolbox.
Right.
Which is why Kelly's got it's like a three-legged stool. It sounds like what are the employees saying? What's out there and that's posted, and then what's Mercer and some of these others doing. And the only reason I do a caution is because in 2010, 2011, we were coming out of the recession, but there was in banking, there was all of these regulatory issues going on and implications that we were having to staff for. The information, the compensation information that we were getting was like 6 to 18 months behind, because there's a process. They go, organizations submit it, they analyze it. So there's some lag time there. So much had happened in that 6 months to 1 year in the market. The salaries that were listed in that particular document were $30,000 or $40,000 off, and like compensation was going, we're in the market. I'm like, well, I'm in the market, and no, you ain't. So I had to go and work with get the stuff out of the candidates. So I love your approach of let's bring all three of these together and see what the data is telling us. I think a lot of organizations, they lean on that one tool. I just want to caution you with the pandemic and everything that's moving compensation so quickly. Don't rely just solely on that. Build yourself a good three-legged stool.
Excellent. Awesome. I know we're actually getting really close on time, so I want to thank you both. Tell everybody that's listening in right now, if you've enjoyed this, and I know you have, I'll make sure that Trent and Kelly's information are both here in the notes beside their profile links on LinkedIn, so you can reach over, you can connect with them, tell them how much you love them, because I know you all do. This has been so much fun. I've learned a ton. I've got a ton of notes over here on my notebook, taking physical notes, which seems strange, but taking physical notes over here. Lots of great takeaways, ideas, suggestions. And I love the range we've had in this. I wanted to make sure we at least got some good practical ideas and things. And then we edged over into leading teams and how to have better stakeholder relationships and everything else in this. And it was so much fun for me to see that breadth. And it just is a testament to how amazing both of you are as leaders. Thank you both for joining us and for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have fun. Kelly, I'll talk to you next month.
Absolutely.
Awesome. To everybody else out there, thank you for joining us this session. Stay tuned for more great ideas, content, inspiration coming right up.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Just tremendous leaders doing good stuff. And sorry, George, I forgot. I got to bring you back with me too. I can't just come back myself. So just great insights. And I wrote down some good things there. I've got some prizes to give away in a minute, but I'd love to hear from you. George, what was one of your big takeaways from that conversation?
Man, there was so much that was jam-packed. That was actually a really, really good starting session. Sometimes it's great to start challenges and sessions, and especially with the virtual, to get people's attention. And man, I'm glued already to this thing. I'll say this, and I love everybody right now that's in the chat. Continue to drive these conversations. There's been so many questions and like thoughtful, solutions. And one of the biggest things that I really took away and really gathered is really to make sure the empathy. Obviously, there's been in nonprofit business and organization and a minister for 14 years prior to me getting in the corporate world. empathy, compassion for people. I'm just a very, I just love people. I had this crazy conversation just last week with a really good friend of mine. He sent me a text message and said, "Can you really love people that you really that really hate you?" And I was like, dude, I love some strange people in my life that have done me wrong, but there's different types of love, right? I think there's also a different type of empathy that we can have for people on certain levels. From an understanding, I think that really breeds compassion. But I think in the workplace, especially with hiring, knowing everybody's circumstances are totally different. We can sit side by side. Ben, I feel like you're data driven junkie, and I love people that have data, but I'm not a data, like I want data on my team. I want Ben beside me. But there are so many ways, as we were talking before, is like, I feel like we're so much alike. I feel like we're connected from afar. We can go weeks without talking and pick up the phone and just complete each other's sentences and tag team each other in and out. And I think that unity of bringing people together and really showing empathy and compassion for people within the workplace, even when you have to, constructively criticize somebody or discipline someone on a matter. I think that empathy word was so important. Another thing that really stood out to me, and somebody said something in the comments about, hiring and having the right team, and how do you have bring a team together when upper management doesn't want to change certain things, and they're just using people. That word "use people" really struck a nerve with me, because I think the failure of a lot of companies, I think the failure of a lot of leaders, and a lot of up and coming leaders, potential leaders that have not been developed. I think the destruction of a company, and I'll simplify it this way, is that we have to stop using money to grow people and grow people to use money, right? So we got to stop this whole, I'm gonna use money to grow people. That's the important thing. We got to use money to grow Bens and to grow Pages and Sherrills and Angelas. We got to use money to grow our team. We cannot use our people to grow money, right? It has to be, our focus has to be turned. There has to be a dynamic paradigm shift in how we do business. Yes, as an entrepreneur, I'm in the business of making money, not to become rich. I like to give, right? You talk about, I always like to give your stuff away. The reason why I like to give stuff away is because I can't receive more stuff if my house is full of already used junk, right? I got to give it away. And so we got to be able to use money to grow people and stop using people to grow money.
I popped that in the chat just now because I think that's a quotable quote from George there, right? Love people, use things. It's easy to get wrapped up in other things. And that's the thing I talk about, is like when I get excited about ROI and metrics and data and everything else, I'm always cautious and always tell the story on myself when I screwed that up one time with my wife. I don't know if I've told it on the summer school, like to the crowd here before, but I'm like, God, every single data point is a person, and it's easy to sometimes forget that, because we get so excited about the numbers, or hey, the things are going the right direction, and there's a person, their dreams, their family, their hopes, all those things behind that. So while I am the data driven, data nut, I also love and appreciate you, Mike, because if I need to lead, I'm never going to lead as well as George, because that's where your natural bent, your naturally, your natural inclinations, your skills and things wrapped around that. So
I'm gonna stop you right there, Ben, and I'm gonna say this.
Okay.
Because you're judging, and a lot of people do this, and I'm calling you out in the midst of our peers, but a lot of people do this. I do this all the time. You cannot judge leadership and impact based on somebody else's experience, right? Whether they may speak better than you, or they may dress better than you, or they may be connected to people better than you. You impact people where you are. Right, you impact people where you are. The life, and this was another thing that was said in that session. How can you make sure your cup is full so that you can give to others? It's self-care, right? It's me realizing my value on my level. If I'm making maximum value, I may not be where Gary Vee is or John Maxwell is. I may not be to their level, but I am where I am because that's where I'm meant to be. And as long as I am okay with me, that impact that I'm bringing to others, you're impacting a lot of people in this network, and you're making a huger impact than I may be. There's people on this chat that I have no clue. I've never met them, that you know they're connected because of you. That is an impact. When you can go live on the video in an hour, you can have hundreds of people commenting and chatting. That is a huge impact. And so I want to tell you, I want to encourage other people in this chat, where you look at other people within your workplace, or maybe you look at other people within outside of your workplace in this world that have the same title as you. The title is something that is given. When you were born in this world, nobody said you are HR leader, HR manager. They called you by name, not by title. Title is a man-made given thing. Who you are is who you are. And I think in order for us to make sure our cup, to get back to that cup filled part, life is the sum of how well we lead ourselves. Before I can lead you, I must first lead myself. Before I can love you, I got to love myself. Before I can help take care of you, I got to make sure I take care of myself. And so for you to be able to make sure your cup is filled, you got to make sure that you're pouring into yourself and not expecting somebody else to pour into you, because expectations has defeated more people than anything, because I expected somebody to give back to me. I'm always serving. I'm always giving. Who's going to give to me? I don't expect anybody to feed me, right? The worst place for a homeless person to die that's starving is not on the streets. The worst place for them to starve is inside of a Walmart or a Kroger's or a Piggly Wiggly, where what they need is right there in front of them. They just haven't maximized the moment. What we need is some selfish time to just shut down and find ourselves at time. That's how we fill our cup. Sorry for that rant, but I got passionate.
I didn't want to step over you there. I had to step back. I wrote that one down too. Again, you have all these incredible ideas that I love. Life's a sum of how well we lead ourselves. All right, one more if you've got it, because I'm gonna do some prizes and giveaways, and then jump into our next conversation. So one last kind of takeaway, or you recognize someone from the audience, right? There was some good.
So I believe it. I'm gonna butcher the name.
Lineage.
Yeah,
that's my best guess. Lineage, my best guess.
Yeah. So there was a question. I'm gonna just do it by last name. Miss Newbon. I can butcher that one. But she said, I have a problem finding balance of when HR needs to step in and initiate some of these ideas versus management needs to be the lead in creating and implementing these ideas on how to engage their staff. The key word, find balance, right? In everything that we do, there's a balance to some things. I think the most important thing to do when we talk about balancing in any perspective in the workplace or in life, in order for there to be balance, you must first identify the big picture, right? What is the big picture? What are we balancing after all? Where are we going? What is our driving force? You can call that your goal. You can call that your vision within that dynamic or that group, your HR team. But I believe before you start delegating work, you got to make sure you understand what projects that need to be divvied up, right? And oftentimes there are certain things that are meant for managers. There are certain things that are meant for leaders. There are certain things that are meant for data-driven people, right? So within that delegation, you must then identify the strengths and the weaknesses of your team and be okay with that, right? There's so many things that I want to be a part of, and sure, I may be able to bring value to, but the value of that may not be time efficient, right? And so what I could help out with may not be the best driving force within the time that we need to get it done. So what is it that I can accept and maximize? And sometimes in the workplace, we want to do a little bit of everything. We want to get out of our circle, our bubble. We may be getting bored or burnt out, and we want to just try a different avenue. But in reality, sometimes it's good to stay in your lane, right? Stay in your lane and make sure you're doing those things. The second thing is focus on staff development. When I talk about balancing and who should do what and delegating, I got to have a big picture. I got to focus on staff development, right? I got to focus on how to really make sure my team is clear to be able to handle the current workload and the components that come with that project, right? And then also understand when I can delegate in that time. And so focus on developing also means you got to be able to be a steward of the person's time. You got to be able to understand what they have already and what they can handle, and to be able to delegate that accordingly. And then lastly, I think when it comes to balancing on who should do what, I think that is done when you clarify the goals and responsibilities. I think that is done in goals and responsibilities, and whether that's scheduling regular one-on-one checks, right? We talked about the MMR. That was a huge thing that was done. He mentioned that, having manager reviews, monthly manager reviews. I think that's important because some things do change. We change, right? And so sometimes our growth and development happens, and we grow into something, and we can experience more things. And so I think it's important to have those monthly reviews, not just from a manager standpoint, but man, find somebody on your team that you don't spend a lot of time with. I encourage my leaders and my managers. I don't use the word managers. Managers are systems and processes within my business. We have leaders. So if you want to say who's the store manager, I don't have one. I have a store leader. I have a sales leader. I have a lead tech. But I don't have store managers because we don't manage people. We manage systems and processes. We lead people. And so I think for you to be able to find the balance of who needs to do what, I think you focus on those key things. Get the big picture, focus on developing your team, and really clarify goals and responsibilities. And you do some of those things with what was mentioned in that last session, having monthly management reviews or monthly team reviews, one-on-ones with your team. And it doesn't have to be an hour, a 5-10 minute, 3-question review.
Wow. I'm trying to keep up with, I'm getting notes. I thought this was gonna be like banter, and I'm over here taking notes and getting life lessons from you, George, as always. I'll say one last thing on your behalf to the audience. Last year, one of the first lessons I learned from George, when he and I actually got to meet and talk and have a real conversation beyond me asking him to be part of summer school last year, one of the first things I learned from George was he personally says that love is spelled T-I-M-E, right? When you spend time with me, show me that you care about me. And that's the thing I would encourage you here. For those leaders you're trying to build a relationship with in the business, spend some time with them. Even if you have to do that virtually, spend some time with them and connect with them. And once you do that, you can really understand what they need, how to align, how to support. So, by the way, she said Nikki, just call her Nikki. That's the easiest way to call her out. So Nikki, great comment. Prizes really quick, and then we're going to jump to our next session. So let's see, do I have that handy? Let's see if I can show the right screen over here and make it come up to the right place. All right. So with that said, y'all reach out to Melanie at upstarthr.com and y'all can get your prizes. So just a couple now. We'll do more later on. So just some people that I've seen in the chat. There have been so many of you, and it's so exciting to see all of us coming together again in the middle of what we're all facing in the workplace. So Madeline, Annette, Nikki, and John, thank you to all of you for chiming in. For everybody else as well, keep on keeping on, and we'll recognize some more of you in just a little bit. So those of you, just reach out to Melanie, and we'll let you pick which one of the two things I mentioned earlier. She'll know what you mean. Just ping her, and we'll get you squared away. Get a prize mailed out to you. All right. So all that said, let's get our next video queued up. So we're going to hear. I know for me, one of the challenges that I had is around hiring, and you probably have it too, is it feels unpredictable, especially right now. It's just, how do we know what's happening? How do we know if this is the right person? How do we know this is the right person? How do we know? Do we know? Because we don't want to make the wrong choice and all those kind of things. So we're going to talk about some of the science behind it. I'm talking to a PhD, right? So he's super sharp. He knows his stuff, and we're going to dive into the science behind hiring, what it takes to pick the right person. We're going to discuss AI just a little bit, talk about some of those things there. And we're going to give away some copies of his book at the end of that session as well as we're going through. So as you're chiming in, I'll give you an audio cue in there somewhere. Chime in, and we'll make sure and give away some copies of his book, which is coming out. It's on pre-order right now. It's called Decoding Talent. That's coming out soon. So all that said, let's go ahead and drop George and I off. Let's get the video queued up, and we'll see you back here shortly. Get ready to take some notes and comment.
Hey, everyone. We're back here with Eric Seidel from Modern Hire. We're going to be talking about, goodness, all kinds of fun stuff. Honestly, my heart has been like pounding, waiting for this conversation, because we're going to talk about AI, we're going to talk about automation, we're going to talk about hiring and how to solve some of the problems that's honestly most of us have probably given up on solving, if we're going to be honest. So we're going to talk about some of those things. And what I love about this is that Eric and the rest of the team put on their scientist hat, because they're scientists and they love to look at this through the lens of data
and numbers and evidence, and not just a, well, this feels nice or this feels good or I like that. It's no, there's actual proof behind this. So I can't build you up any higher than that as a data nerd, but as a really smart guy. Eric, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to solve all of the problems of hiring in just 20 minutes today.
Yes. So ready, go. Here we go. So before we dive into some of those things, would you take a second, tell us more about who you are, a little bit of your background, so the audience knows that I'm not just joking about some of that?
Well, sure. Thank you. Yeah. So my name is Eric Seidel. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist by training, and work at Modern Hire. I'm the EVP of Innovation, which entails overseeing our lab group, which is a bunch of psychologists and data scientists and basically geeks like me who love to sit around and think about data and think about how we can get better data and what we can do with that data in terms of providing actionable insights for our clients. So how can we take human data in particular and use it to promote better decisions in organizations? Who to hire, obviously, is front and center with our company being called Modern Hire. So, that's essentially what we do. We play a sandbox with lots and lots of data, all types of data, and try to figure out how can we use the most, modern cutting edge tools. A lot of it's AI stuff right now, but there's always been a lot of powerful statistical tools in our field, at least for the last several decades. So anything we can use to extract meaning that our clients can use to make better quality decisions, more fair decisions, etc.
Excellent. And before we go any further, I don't want to forget, congratulations on the upcoming book. So you've got one coming out, what seems like an eternity from now, a few months away. But during this session, for those of you out there listening right now, you're engaging, you're asking questions, you're sharing your inputs and your thoughts on some of these things that Eric and I are talking about. We'll grab a couple of your names and we will pre-order you a copy of that book at no cost to you, just as a fun way to thank Eric for joining us, but also to help spread that word, because I've already got a pre-read on the book, by the way. And it's incredible. Lots of great stories, great examples, very practical applications of this, because Eric used like data 7 times, I think, in his intro on himself, his bio, but it's about making this really practical and tangible for us as hiring leaders. So congratulations on the book. I know it's a lot of work and definitely going to be awesome to see that come to light.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're also an author. This is my first book, our first book, and it's coming out in February. So it does take an awful long time to get these things out on bookstore shelves, but it's coming. And I've been saying, if you're looking for that perfect Valentine's gift for your significant other, the book, this is not it. And this is definitely not it. But you could get some flowers and this book, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Right brain, left brain. We'll get both of those things in there. And the book is called Decoding Talent, by the way. So I didn't want to, I was all excited about it. And the title is actually called Decoding Talent. So you can actually go right now and add that to your Amazon pre-order if you want to. But wait till the end of the session so you find out if you won one of those. All right. So we're going to talk about, let's just start with it. You mentioned AI a minute ago. AI as a conversation around hiring seems to be pretty polarizing, right? And I don't know if there's a lot of news, a lot of headlines, things like that. But what I appreciate, as I said earlier about you and your team, is you're very much focused on, let's use actual data. We're not just going to do something because it seems flashy or cool. We're going to do it because the data actually says it works. So talk about what we know to be true when it comes to AI in the hiring space.
Yeah, that's great. Well, AI is obviously all the rage. Everybody's talking about AI. I think it's in your book title and my book title. And yet, I don't like the term AI very much. I mean, artificial intelligence. And if you just think about what that sounds like, it's not really what it is. And, artificial intelligence as we use it today is basically just advanced statistics. It's just statistics. And the techniques are newer than the traditional ones in the social sciences and psychology. But there's statistics at the core of it. They're good tools to use to understand data. And, modern AI, which is really, when I say AI, I'm really thinking about deep learning, which is a particular type of AI that is super powerful at being able to understand complex data, unstructured data, messy data, confusing data sets that we used to have a lot of trouble analyzing. And deep learning is fantastic at that. And that's why we can, get into cars that can nearly drive themselves now, because all these cameras around the car collecting all this information being processed with deep learning. It's making sense out of all this chaotic, weird data, a sign over here and a pothole over here and a person on a bike over here, so it's able to process that messy, weird data in a way that we never could before. And it's the same thing with the hiring process. It's, traditionally we had assessments, we had tests, and you'd answer, which of, these things do you like the most? And there'd be 4 choices, and you pick B, and then we'd give you 1 point for that. And it's a very simple way to kind of summarize who you are as a person, And now we can take any sort of data. We can take what you say. Some companies are taking what people look like and video, facial recognition things. We're not doing that. Some companies are doing that. But you can also look at social media data. You can look at resumes. You can look at anything and everything that's out there and process it in a quantitative way. And we couldn't do that before. So that's really cool. But when you talk about it as AI, people think of, Terminator robots that are going to shoot us and stuff. So, and that's not what it is. It's just statistical analysis stuff. So I think we have to educate people on what it really is and why it's helpful and why it's good.
Yes. Well, the thing that occurs to me as you started talking about that is, I said earlier, like some of these problems we've given up on trying to solve because we are not made to consume large quantities of information, process that, and then come to some conclusion at the end of that. We're just not made for it, right? But the machine, an algorithm, a system, a software, whatever you want to call it, they're made for that purpose. Let's consume all this stuff that we know about Eric and then decide, is Eric a good fit for this job because he's got the top 3 or the top 5 things that he needs to be successful there? Or is Mary a better fit for that because she has those things we're looking for? And it's not about looking at your skin color, your name, all those things that when a human's in the process, we can't help but see those things, right? We can't blind ourselves to all of that stuff. And so the algorithms in some ways can be less biased than us if they're looking at the skills or how you perform on an assessment and those kinds of things. And that's why I get so excited about this and why some of the headlines and things like that bug me, because the people that are sharing those things, they don't understand this side of it. They only are talking about one narrowly defined aspect of AI and hiring, and they're missing the chance to see how much value it can bring us in these other kinds of areas like you're talking about.
100%. Yeah, I think unfortunately, some of the early headlines of people trying to apply AI were, describing missteps that companies took, where they were basically studying a big set of data that had a lot of bias in it. And there's developing an AI rule that essentially replicated that bias at scale in some sort of decision-making process. So if you do that in the hiring process, you could easily develop an algorithm that, weights a person's skin color or something ridiculous that you would never want to do somehow in the algorithm. And of course, these algorithms can be very complicated and sort of black box too. So it can be hard to recognize that. And I think we saw that happening a lot in the beginning. And now, that probably still happens, but there's a responsible way to develop these tools that doesn't do that, where you watch out for that and you make sure that that's not happening. And, AI has certain caused bias, but it can also solve bias, by just simply processing data more effectively however we train it to process that data. And if we're cognizant of the ways we want to avoid it, being used, then it's just programming. We can program it to do what we want it to do, So I think it's ultimately going to be proved to be very effective at helping us get a handle on bias.
Talk about that a little bit, because when we're thinking about hiring, the way we've always done it, when we're looking at someone's resume or we're talking to them like, oh, you went to that school? My cousin went to that school. Oh, that's great. Or we find some of those things, those points of connection, because that's comfortable for us. But that is bias in the process. And we seem to have rose-colored glasses on. We assume that's just good recruiting. No, that is similarity bias, right? And we lean into those things, but when an algorithm does it, suddenly it's wrong or bad or egregious. And so talk about how to balance the human and the AI in this process. Where's the right place to apply each of those elements, if you will? Because
And if we're gonna buy into the idea that you and I are talking about here about using this in some areas of the process, where does the human come in, and where should we be prioritizing that piece of it?
Yeah. Well, I think that, and for 20 years we've said this, but the best way to use statistical tools in hiring is in conjunction with human decision makers. So you have assessments or other tools that are validated to predict performance, and you use them, but you don't use them as the sole decision-making criteria of your hiring process. You use them, and then you have a human come in, review the results, and review the whole candidate application and make the final decision. And the reason is that the automated tools, they're not good enough to make a full 100% decision on their own. And AI certainly isn't at this point. Now, it may be at some point in the future, but it can miss things. And, there's no silver bullet. So, ideally what you're doing is you're taking a well-developed, scientifically validated statistical or AI solution, and you're using that to help rank and stack your candidate pool and surface a list of people that are most likely to be successful. And then from that shorter list, you're using, trained subject matter experts, hiring managers, people who know what the job entails and what they need to go through and interview those people. And at the end of that process, if they're doing that process right, using structured behavioral interviews and things of that nature, then you have the best quality decision that you can stand behind. So I think that's the reality is that's the best way to do it at this point. And, as you said, humans, we're biased. We're not good at being completely objective. And that's why we have structured behavioral interviews. If the audience is familiar with those, it's basically a way to take a very human type of thing, an interview, which is a conversation, and make it structured and scientific. So instead of just talking about stuff, you're going to ask specific questions and rate the responses on a scale that you can see. So you're trying to make it as objective as possible. And so you're trying to make it less like a date and more like, a very structured sort of scientific interview. And I think a lot of the time when we're talking to people, we are basically dating, in the hiring process too. A typical interview, it's like you're chit-chatting, you're talking, and you're looking for a connection. And that is not scientific. And that might help you hire somebody that you like, but it's not really going to help you hire somebody who's really well suited to do the job. And it's very, very different things there. And so, AI tools, statistical tools can help us identify people with the right skills and capabilities to really get the job done. And so that we're not weighting those sorts of internal biases that we have so highly.
Thinking the outcomes of those two different processes are about as different as getting a bunch of roses or getting a Decoding Talent book on Valentine's Day. It's about how different those two different paths are to take. The dating reference brought me right back to that. I couldn't help it. So one of the things that I heard you talk about recently is going beyond a dashboard, right? So like making sense of all this data that we're talking about in the hiring process, because we have so much information about people. We think often like, well, the resume is what we've got. That's all we know about someone, but there are other things that we know about them. And you mentioned some of the other data sources we can type into if we want to. Talk about going beyond the dashboard though, because I see a lot of dashboards that are we're presenting 50 different pieces of information all at once. And again, we're not made to process that. How do we go beyond that to something a little more actionable, something that we can actually help us as a decision support tool?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of progress that I hope will be made in the dashboard world as we, sort of civilize AI capabilities more. And, we're swimming in data. The whole world is data, right? You can look at these statistics about how much information is created every nanosecond, and it's insane. Now, all these YouTube videos are being uploaded every minute, and, there's data. But we don't know what to do with that data, right? And so it's traditionally over the last, couple decades, there's been a big focus on, data visualization and business intelligence and the whole kind of dashboard thing. So you collate all this data for your organization, and then you think about how to build really pretty graphs And if you Google, data visualization, there's all these books on how to create beautiful charts and graphs and things. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like if I got to look at some charts and graphs, I want them to be pretty. That's a good thing, But at some point then in the dashboard, you're still swimming in information. The charts might be pretty, but it's a ton of data. And so the human has to wade through all this stuff, click on drop downs, go through different things, try to figure out what it all means. You, the human, have to figure it all out what it all means, despite how pretty the dashboard is. I think of it then as if you are watching a basketball game and one team has a score of 76 and the other has a score of 38, you know that the team with 76 points is winning. But we're fortunate in this world where we're watching a sports game and there are no scores. There's players on the court and they're throwing the ball around, and maybe some of them are kind of tall and some of them aren't as tall, and some of them seem really energetic and some of them don't seem like they have as much energy. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out who wins the game by those cues, because there's no score. And that's where we are with dashboards. We're trying to evaluate all this data, trying to figure out what it means, but there's no score. It's just data. And so the thing that, we're trying to do, and that I think a lot about, is how do you go from a dashboard to a scoreboard? How do you take the sea of data and condense it all down into metrics that are actually meaningful? And there's, of course, you can look at KPIs. There's ways to create metrics and things, but a lot of those still don't cut it, because what we really want to do is have single scores, a single score, for example, on the ROI of an entire process. And we want to have a C-level person be able to log in, see that score immediately, and know everything they need to know about how a certain process is working. And so what we do is we take a number, we create a number through a formula, and we validate that number. We validate that it's predictive of something or that it's correlated with something. And then all of a sudden it starts to be imbued with meaning. And that single number, you can look at it and you don't have to interpret it. You can just see it and immediately understand what it means. Now, that's the type of thing that we've been doing for a long time with assessments. We can give you a assessment report for an employee, and it's got competency scores. Now, these aren't scores about whether they're extroverted or introverted, because I don't care whether a candidate is extroverted or introverted. If they're a salesperson, I care whether they can sell. And if they're a customer service person, I care whether they can deliver good service. Now, being extroverted might be helpful in some contexts, but it's not really correlated with those types of results. It's more complicated than that. So, that's the sort of thing, like I want to tell you if your candidate can sell, and if they can deliver good service, and if they can stay in the job and not turn over. That's what's important. It's not important, how they answer a bunch of questions or whether they're conscientious or extroverted. Those are side things that go into, the things you really need to know. So what we want to do is use statistics to sort of interpret all that data for you. I'll pause.
So one of my good friends, the extroversion comment reminded me, he was the head of learning for an organization a few years ago. And they said, hey, our sales team is having some trouble. Let's try to find some people who are extroverted. And they actually went through and looked at, he said, no, let's wait. And he went through and looked at the people who were high performing in that space and said, hey, they're doing these three things. These are the three behaviors they exhibit. Do we see those behaviors in any of the candidates or any of the other people we're trying to do? Let's train these behaviors in our people. Let's use those as our go-to, not how much they like to talk and how energetic they are and how excited they are to open their mouth, because sometimes in sales, we think that's the best and sometimes it's not. It depends on the role. And so he said, we learned the hard way because they were about to spend $2 million on a training program for everybody to make them more extroverted, essentially. Like, let's make you more charismatic and more vocal. And this is, wait a minute, we don't actually need that. Maybe let's figure out what those behaviors are. And so I love that you're talking about this through the lens of, we should be looking for not how chatty they are, how friendly they feel like when in the interview, or how comfortable they make us, but do they have the stuff? They have the capability to do that job that we're looking at hiring them for.
And looking at it through that lens solves problems with diversity and equity. It solves problems with performance. It solves problems you mentioned with retention, right? We want to keep them around. If they can do the job well, we want to keep them around long term. So it solves all those kinds of things we often struggle with.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. And, it helps us find people that are going to be stars at the job, and they may not tell us what we want to hear.
Yes.
I joke sometimes data scientists and engineers and things that we work with, and there's nothing that makes me happier than hearing one of them come back to me and say, that is completely wrong. What I just said was completely wrong, and here's why. I love it when that happens. I love when one does that, because I just learned something. I just learned something that we can correct and but that's not always a comfortable feeling, but it's an environment that breeds innovation and progress, So just something for all of us to consider is not necessarily hiring our best friends, but hiring people who can really, put out there the type of thoughts and thinking that we need.
Excellent. Awesome. So I know we're coming up close to time. One of the things I told you I wanted to make sure we shared with the audience, I was actually looking at some of the resources and things that you and the team have been putting together lately. And there was this really interesting report that's coming out, or it's just come out, brand new, and there's about to be a webinar session on it, but it's around hiring for retention, right? We talk about that for a second before we wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. So our team, we've got about 50 or so industrial psychologists and data scientists, and they do a lot of research on different topics. And so they've done a lot of research on retention, on minimizing turnover, and helping companies to get people for as long as possible. And this webinar, there's also a white paper that goes with it, is one of my favorites, and it's super insightful in terms of how companies can get people on board who are likely to stay with them. And so we've got, I think it's 3 of our psychologists that'll be doing that webinar, and really excited about it. So I encourage everyone to check it out. There's good insights, scientifically based insights in there. No,
I'll make sure to put the I'm gonna put the link in the show notes or in the comments right now for the white paper, so they can go check that one out. Because again, we're talking about this stuff that can feel, we're talking about trying to get really hard, specific down to behaviors, competencies. We're still talking about data, things like that can seem a little bit abstract. And so go check that out, because we'll use some ideas on how you can actually hire for retention. You can think about using the hiring process as a lens for improving the retention rates at your organizations, because there's some good ways to leverage that. And again, using numbers and data and evidence, and which is always going to stretch us, because we're usually the people, but that's going to stretch us in some good and positive ways. Eric, thank you so much for joining us for this. I've enjoyed learning from you. I've got a lot of notes and things over here, and I've really just enjoyed getting to chat with you on some of these things and break down some of the myths around this, because the headlines are loud and kind of out there, but I feel the leaders that I talk to that are using these tools are solving real problems every day. So thank you for joining us and sharing.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate the time, and it's great to talk with you.
Absolutely. Everybody else out there, hang tight for another session coming right up.
Right. Goodness. I hope you enjoyed that. I've got to post that link in the chat in just a minute when I get a second. I'll post a link to that resource that he and I talked about, because I almost posted the wrong thing. So I'll get that to you in just a minute, so you can see that, learn more about some of the things they're talking about. That's one of the, I'll tell you behind the scenes, let's pull back the curtain for a second. We had a speaker that's last minute just could not make it for the event. And so I was actually going to talk this afternoon about some of our research we've just finished on hiring for retention, how to hire and how to think about hiring through that lens of retention. And I've seen some great chat on that today, actually, in the comments and the conversations actually as well, which has been really intriguing. But I'll post that for you, because I know that I was curious about it when he mentioned it, and I'll make sure and pick out a couple people as well for the books. And I'll let you know in a little bit who those people are. We're going to jump right into our next conversation. I've already seen Peter Cersei here in the chat today. He's already been chiming in and engaged and commenting and supportive. He's an incredible and wonderful person, and you get to hear from him in just a minute on how to think about hiring in a different kind of way. How to look at, we always say we want to get different results. And we're going to talk about doing some different kinds of things. And you'll notice this time I told George I needed him to to keep it quiet for a second because he and I will get riffing and then we'll never rein it back in. So in a little bit, we'll come back. We'll do some review with George, talk about some big ideas and things. I know this next session is one he was most looking forward to on the agenda. So here we go. Let's hear from Peter Searcy on hiring differently.
Everyone, welcome back to another fun conversation. We're going to be talking with one of my friends, Peter Searcy, about what's happening in some of the things that the FBI is doing around hiring, and also get his insights into why we shouldn't be hiring only for someone's degree, someone's experience, but also looking at other factors, especially today, as every company is saying, we can't find people, and we're going to use how to cast a broader nets, I guess, and explore that a little bit. I'm so excited to quiz him because he and I did not prep very much, and so I'm so excited to hear what he has to say. I have my pen ready over here to make my own notes and learn from him as we go. So Peter, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we dive into some of the fun stuff, would you take a minute to tell the audience a little more about who you are and what you do, and leave out all the interest you have in pumpkin spice baked goods, because those are, well.
Yeah, I'm definitely a pumpkin flavored baked goods kind of guy for fall. So I'm with the FBI. I've been with the FBI for 23 years. Started out in operations, and then, like a lot of us, found my way to human resources kind of sideways. Fell in love with it. So for 5 years, I was the head of foreign language hiring for translators, interpreters, things like that for Bureau. And then for 4.5 years, I was head of hiring for the entire FBI, which was a crazy job, but super fun, really interesting, loved it. And then about 4 months ago, they said, hey, I know you're not an accountant or do anything in finance, but why don't you go sideways to take a role in our finance division? So now I'm trying to figure out finance stuff. But really, they're all people problems over there anyway. So, it's all good.
It would probably do some financial people, some accountants, some, financial analysts, things like that, some good to be around people.
It's all, we're not communicating well. How do we set a common culture? How do we problem solve? It's all the same stuff.
If only there was a HR person that we could plug into that.
That's all
it is on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. That is so awesome. And I'm so what's fun for me is that might be an example we're talking about here in this conversation today, right? There's nothing on your resume that says, you know what, we should do it, Peter. Just plug him in over here. But a lot of company I'm talking with, a lot of leaders we're talking to, and some of the other sections of the event today, we're hearing from leaders talking about how to cast a bigger net, how to attract more candidates, how to be different in their hiring practices, because finally things got painful enough. One of my favorite sayings is when the pain of change is less than pain of saying, we're going to make that change, right?
Yeah.
And so more organizations are leading into how to make that change. I'd love to hear from you, because I've seen a piece you've written on this and kind of thinking about what's happening in the space. And so respect your opinion a lot. How can companies start down that path of saying, okay, let's consider this? Why should they, I guess, kind of start with that, kind of cast a vision for it, and then we'll get into some of the hows and what it takes to make that actually work.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the biggest picture, like you said, everything is a hot mess right now in the labor market. And so that comes with pain, but also tons of opportunity. And it's just irrational to say, we have all these people applying for jobs, but none of the right people, and none of these people, all these people in theory want to work for us, but they can't somehow. And yet we have all these open recs that we can't fill. Like, these facts just do not align themselves, I think, really. I think then we have to go back and be like, okay, thousands of people maybe, or hundreds of people have been outside the company, or dozens of people, whatever, want to work for us, but somehow they're not the right people. So let's examine that. And I think, if you look at the organization you're in right now at almost any level, and you just look around at who you work with today, not everybody comes from what you would think of as the most traditional background for the role you're trying to fill, right? And so, as I have these conversations with hiring managers and my peer executives, I often ask them things like, well, who is the best person that works with you that comes from a non-traditional background? Would you take more of them? And of course, the answer is always yes. I was like, well, you can, you can do that. And why not risk the possibility of getting somebody amazing instead of just getting, you just having these open recs stay open and open. And, at some point, I think we all we think about is the risk of this person we're going to bring in maybe failing, right? Because that's what do all hiring managers want? I want somebody that's going to come in and be successful, right? So it's the risk of future failure that there gets, but we don't think of that, loss of productivity, the absence, and the stress that puts on all of our other people, like those are sometimes tangible, sometimes a little bit more intangible, but the longer those go on, like that's a huge cost too. And is that actually less than this future risk of maybe failure? I don't think so.
Career Builder had studied a couple of years ago, and the big takeaway, there's like $1 million price tag on the cost of the skills gap. And they got into the real specific things. Like there's, as you were saying, the cost of the morale of your team when they are consistently having to cover that other thing that's not getting done because that person's not here, because you're holding out for that perfect unicorn that's somewhere out there. There's a lot of cost to that. I was glad they factored those things in, because usually we think, well, it's just a pain, or it's just trouble, it's whatever else. I had a leader in the past that said, hey, we're saving money on our budget because that position's not filled. I said, yeah, until one of your people quits, because they're tired of carrying that double weight on their shoulders. And I don't know why it's to force them to see it that way, but there is a cost to that.
Yeah. Well, but I think part of it is like, we're HR people, we know the labor market. Most hiring managers don't. Like, that's not their job, that's not their expertise.
Right.
Right. So all they think is, you can't do your job well enough to find me the person that I'm looking for. So you just need to work harder. We know that that's crazy, but they don't. So I think a huge part of our role as HR professionals is to try to like make sure the hiring managers understand like what we're working with, what is happening. Like, it's hard because I know because of course I talk to my peers. They're always like, well, hiring managers, they don't want to hear reality. They don't want to hear what you have to say. And I get it. I mean, I've been in those situations both times. I think we all have been, right? And that's why, having that relationship of trust, with those hiring managers, like working really hard to build those relationships is so critical, because like when you tell them something that they don't want to hear and they don't know you, all they know is you're some guy from outside the department who's basically saying, I can't have the shiny thing that I'm convinced I need to be successful. They're just going to push back. And that's the fear of their own failure, right? And so you need to like reassure them, hey, I'm here to help you be successful. If you're successful, I'm successful. All I want to do is fill your job and you're successful. And then like, I got other stuff to do, right? So let me help you. And we're going to build this relationship of trust. So I think if you like focus really in on that relationship, that you're here to help make them successful, then maybe, that you can start to tell them things like maybe they don't want to hear, maybe you can lead them to think of new ways that they hadn't thought about before. Like that's how I would start for sure.
In terms of building a relationship, would you recommend asking questions, kind of understanding what their priorities are, or understanding what earlier, one of the ways that you said that the thing they care about is team performance, stability, like making sure that things are just working, because they don't want to have to stop what they're doing and focus on fixing that thing.
Yeah.
I think you said, why not risk getting someone amazing? I wrote that down. I think that's a great way of looking at it. What sort of questions should someone ask to start building a better relationship, or start deepening that relationship that already exists, so that when it comes time to say, I want to push back on this gently but firmly, what's the best way to kind of put some money in that bank, so when it's time to take out that withdrawal, it's not a lot of pushback?
Yeah, I would say, obviously, like once you understand what the functional role is, what the actual like hard details of the open rec are. And, sometimes there are like non-negotiable things. Obviously, if you want an accountant, you have to have an accounting degree. Like there, or experience in accounting. There are certain non-negotiables really. But I think you have to understand like, what is that person? What's that team? What does your program do within the organization? I think it's also really important to understand, are you in a maintaining mode, a growing mode, a rebuilding mode, a, burning things down to rebuild next year mode? Because you're going to hire different people for all of those situations, right? But then I would always go in, people always say, well, what are you looking for? And they're like, oh, 10 years of experience and X and Y and Z, and like list all the, in a perfect world, I'd have those things, right? But instead, I think what you say is like, okay, the people on your team that are the best, why are they the best? What makes them the best? And a degree from Stanford or 10 years of experience in the industry, I mean, maybe is the reason, but probably not. It's probably like, they're a great problem solver. They have great intuition. They work their butt off all the time. They are super dedicated and they really want to get things right. They have tons of initiative, all of which are the soft skills that anybody can have. And I think that's where you sort of lead them. You say, okay, so what you really want are more people like them. So you want people with like high level initiative, problem solving, dedication to what they're doing. I always throw, because nobody outside HR knows the word learning agility. They don't know what that means, but I always throw that in because they know they need that if they don't know that. The ability to learn new things and be successful. I always throw that in. They always nod. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to find you people. That's their core skill set. That's the people that's going to be succeed. And then if they have this, like, then those are like the next layer out. And think of it that's the core. And then every one of these other things that you would love, those are like the bonus options. Like that's the downloadable content, bonus pack that you get after you've solved the core game, right? That's how I usually try to like pitch it to them and see it that way. And usually, not always, like usually that works. And sometimes they'll push back and be like, okay, but like tell me why that's important. Because when you talked about your person that's amazing, you didn't mention that right off the bat. So like tell me what's going on like that. And would your amazing person right now meet the rec you're giving me? Right? Like, so that's also something to do is like, okay, how many people on your team right now meet the rec you're giving me? And sometimes that's not relevant and you would expect them to say that. Like, hey, I have a team full of newbies. I need an experienced person to balance them out. That's totally legitimate. I have a team of very, very experienced people. I need, they all meet that. I was like, okay, so it sounds like what you can use is you can bring in some junior talent because you have all these people to mentor them, right? So like, there's a little bit of like pushing them in the direction you want to go.
I love those examples because those are very tangible and practical for people listening in. Say, okay, now I can go and do this thing. So next time you're having one of those conversations, or you're out there listening right now, when you're having those conversations, use some of those things Peter's talking about. So those tactics, some of those strategies. What's funny is what's interesting, I guess, not funny. What's interesting is as you were talking through some of those things a minute ago, like get them to say yes to a few things. And then when it's time to say, hey, and so next time we're going to do this, I'll look for these things and those will be bonuses. Okay. You're leading them this path. It's like an old sales tactic to get them to start saying yes. And at the end of the process, they'll say yes to whatever the big ask is. And that's the big ask. You're building up to that. And you're like, oh, this is important. What about this thing? Do you think this is important to this person, to this role? And you start getting them to these like little micro yeses leading up to that big, I'm going to ask you to do something that might be a little uncomfortable. Commit to that. And there's a lot of research that shows people do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting that you said it's like kind of like the sales tactic. And I kind of want to talk about that because part of the reason, like when you go into a high sales pressure place, that we react negatively to that, which we often do, right? If they're trying to sell you windows or whatever, a car, they show up at your neighborhood with their flyer and the clipboard and you just like, you're adrenaline already. It's because there's no relationship.
Your car warranty, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. It's because there's no relationship of trust. There's nothing to base this, I don't want to say pressuring, but like this maneuvering on, right? That's why creating that relationship is so important. And if you're new to this hiring manager, you do need to spend that time and be like, hey, let me tell you about me. Let me tell you how I work. Tell me more about you. Again, I'm here. The most important thing is I'm going to make you successful. My job is to ensure that you hit your numbers, you meet your goals, you do whatever you do, right? Because that establishes that you are the partner in what they're trying to accomplish, not, look, I got a rec to fill, tell me what you want, I'll do it, whatever. I'm like a chop shop. I'm just like in and out, in and out, in and out. And I mean, there are HR departments like that, like clearly, but you don't want to be one of those HR departments, right? You want to be this partner, right? And so I would say jump in and start there, right? That's the more you can concretely ground it in their business objectives and you are here to make their business objectives successful, the more likely you are to take away their anxiety about, but what if I fill in the blank? Don't get somebody in time. Don't get somebody who's the right, level. Don't get somebody who could be successful. You're trying to like pull that anxious energy out of the system, right?
Yes. I'll give you a quick example of a company, a recruiter that I talked to a year and a half ago that was doing this because they had run into this problem where the skills they were looking for, they could not find. And so they go back to the hiring manager and say, okay, what are the things people got to have? Okay, well, I've got to have this degree from this school, and I've got to have experience with this competitor. And they had these really specific things, and they could never get them to budge on that. So she actually said, okay, we're going to have a group interview this week. We're going to have 5 people up front. You're going to have, you're going to take notes in the back. I'll ask them the questions. At the end, you tell me which ones you like. And so at the end of this, they asked them some questions to understand their kind of technical proficiency, things like that. At the end, they said, okay, I like number 3 and number 5. And only then did the hiring manager get the resume and find out, oh, by the way, none of those candidates had either of those things that you said were a must have for that job. She was trying to get into to realize that this is something you've figured out in your head. It's not actually anything in reality. And so that's another example of someone I've seen kind of trying to break down those barriers gently, but to make a really clear point that the things that you think are true, they may be true at one point. Absolutely. Right. I don't want to say that your opinion doesn't matter, but today this is a very different environment. And rather than just saying, oh, it's hard, it's no, let's use some actual data or evidence to try to back up this new approach.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the reality is also you can tell in a screening interview or a first round interview, are these people interested in your company or your organization, or were they just shotgunning resumes out? Right. And, you can't, you don't just want to take, anybody either. Right. But I think, if people are passionate about your organization or the industry, that will carry them a long way. Right. Like, especially if they're earlier in their career or more probably they're trying to change industries, right? They're trying to go from one to another. Like, changing industries mid career is hard, right? There's a lot of institutional inertia keeping you where you are. So if people are making a really active effort to leave what they're doing and going somewhere else, to me, those are always really great candidates because they are something is really driving them to make this change, in middle age and mid career. I'm like, you want to find out like what that is, because you might be able to tap into that passion. And if you're the one that gives them the break that helps them like jump to something they're passionate about, man, they will love you forever. And they will work their butt off for you way beyond somebody that's like, you're just another notch in my belt in a career that I already have and work that I already know how to do, that I'm already bored with, So like, I would say try to tap into that like hunger to do something with you. And so if they don't have like that exact thing you're looking for, maybe that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said earlier, one of the things that the first arguments is, well, these things are non-negotiable, right? I don't want a hard searcher that's really passionate but has no degree. Okay, I get that,
obviously, yeah.
But for a lot of the kinds of things we're talking about, there are gray areas, and there's one leader I talked to recently said we're now hiring one level below with the expectation to develop that person up into the next whatever we need them to be. Not only because it's hard to find people at that level that they've been posting at in the past, but also because she said if we hire them for a competitor, we find out we have to untrain them on some of the things they've learned because that's not how we do it, or what we believe, or the things that are important to us and our values. So she said we're actually able to, while we have a longer ramp up time to train them into the specific skill areas we need, we're also not having to break some of those old mindsets they had because they picked up these bad habits at another company, essentially. So there's some fun things around this.
Yeah.
Too. There's some side benefits that you don't even realize essentially when you're starting down this path.
Yeah. When we were working with our IT, hiring people, basically the group in the FBI to hire software engineers, which is very difficult for anybody, but like, the FBI, it's not known as a software engineering place. So it was already like upstream. And they were really convinced we needed all these like very, very experienced, high, graded, high salary individuals, to get the top talent combined. For a variety of reasons, we changed the entire hiring mechanism and effectively pulled hiring managers from multiple groups into like big group interviews of multiple candidates at a time, right? For a bunch of other reasons. But what we found actually is by just, hey, interview all these people, whoever you like, we'll make an offer. Suddenly the average experience level started to go down because they're like, oh my God, we're finding all this amazing talent at the lower level and we're starting to bring these people in. And if we had been so focused on, like in the past, we only want to see people with like XYZ years of experience, blah, blah, blah. These people would never even have come to us. We would never have talked to them. And suddenly the average, salary levels started to go down, not in any bad way, just like they were bringing in younger talent who was hungrier, who was like more passionate, about it. And that was a very unexpected benefit for them. I was like, really, was it unexpected for me? No, for me, not unexpected. For you, maybe unexpected. For me, obviously natural, right? So, sometimes just even changing the structure of having, try to bring people in, maybe multiple levels, you'll sort of see a little bit more too. So that's another practical thing is like, if one group is hiring experienced and junior people, like maybe have them all interview together. It's like, hey, whoever you like will fill open roles, and just sort of see where we are. And like, maybe they'll like more junior people because maybe they'll be impressed, right? You just have to think about the right way to do that. But sometimes just mixing it up a little bit is also, will get you some good rewards.
Goodness gracious. Okay. So I've written down a ton of ideas and things and suggestions, everything else. Again, that quote from earlier, I'll say it again because I get a chance to quote Peter Cersei. It's a great day. Why not risk getting someone amazing? That's a great argument, right? And a great conversation point for that, because the risk in their head is risk of non-performance, the risk of, my team's going to be unstable, the risk of not being able to meet our deliverables. Why not risk getting someone incredible that actually helps you to hit all of those things? The way I push back on that in the past is, these things are important. And I say, okay, let's look at the people you've hired. You talked about the positive side of that a minute ago. Look at the people you've hired in the past. They're great now. They're high performers for your team, but even they have something that you're like, man, if I can get someone that didn't have that gap, right? A local nonprofit just last year hired the executive director. He had been there for 40 years, leading this organization for 40 years, just retired. We're hiring someone. They said, we want someone that's him, but with these extra things. I'm like, you can't do that. You're going to end up trading off something else. You can't. That perfect person may look great on paper, interview well, but you'll find out once they're there, okay, there those gaps are. We knew they were there somewhere. And so that's the other tool that I kind of use on that side, is to say, just remember, we want to imagine this perfect world where that person comes in, they have all those things, and there is great our existing team, and they fit in seamlessly, and usually it's an or. They get this or that, but they can't have all of those.
Right. I would say, in two situations like that, like I usually say, well, Jesus is busy. He's got a job. He's not available. Who else can you have? Right. But also think about, like, especially, in that situation where a very experienced person is left and they're so adamant they have to have that. I'm like, yeah, but when you hired that person X years ago, think of how different the external world was. Right. So I always try to pin it to the external world is changing, and we need somebody who can understand the skills that are needed right now, but also what's going to be needed in the future, right? And whatever we hire for today, 5 years from now, they're going to be doing something that doesn't exist now, working on some software program, doing some kind of thing that your organization doesn't even do, right? So you want to hire for that ability to like grow and evolve. So if you're hiring for the ability to grow and evolve, if they have 100% of like the perfect candidate right now, they're still going to have to grow and evolve, right? It doesn't really matter. So maybe you don't need everything you think you need. And the reality is people on your team who are amazing don't have that now. Just
one last thing, one last thing I want to kind of throw your way really quick, because you said earlier, you were careful. You did say, we want to hit the copy button and find a person just like we've got, right? Because a lot of leaders come in and say that. From an equity perspective, you said behaviors earlier. Let's find the person that has the right behaviors to do the job well, right? Or those inclinations to be able to learn to be able to do the job well. And I think that opens up the door too to finding people outside of that normal bubble. I would imagine the people that naturally gravitate to the work that the FBI does, and you can correct me on this, would be white, adult male, or white men essentially would be drawn to that, because when you watch all the movies, everything else, the FBI agent's always some guy. And so that seems like it would open up the opportunities for other people to be considered for this, when we don't hold to what we kind of put them in the copy or hit the copy button, and we'll find someone else just like that.
Yeah. And I also think you have to explain, I mean, we're in HR. We all really understand why diversity is important. You don't have to explain it to us. But I think outside of that, like maybe they understand it's important, but maybe they think it's kind of some kind of PC, BS. Yeah. Okay. Diversity, blah, blah. But like, or I'm colorblind, it doesn't matter. I just want the best person. I'm like, okay, sure. We've all heard that too, right? I think it's really important to define that lack of diversity in a way that's important to your organization. So for the FBI, it's operational risk. That's the language of our organization. If we are not diverse, those are victims we cannot comfort, sources we cannot develop, populations that we cannot aid, part of the American population that we cannot effectively represent. That is an operational risk, and we're not going to be successful. Man, light bulbs go off when you define it that way, because that is that is our lane.
Mission critical, right?
Saying, yeah, saying it's really important to be diverse. They don't care. I mean, I don't say they don't care, but like that does not speak to them. So like I would say find the language that your organization understands that, where the diversity is going to improve, whether it's like, hey, these are new customer market segments that we're going to be able to have better insight in, whatever it is for your organization, and then that paired with like people like this, people who have these soft skills, these skills, that will really open it up to, increasing the diversity. If the manager has an awareness of like what their diversity numbers are, and all anyway. So you should also kind of try and see like, hey, if I were to take a look at your team, like it's always awkward to ask about the diversity numbers. So I was trying to say like, hey, if your team were to take a group picture, like how uniform would that picture look? Right? That's like a very soft, way to be like, hey, would everybody picture kind of look the same? Would it be like there would be a lot of variety? Would it be like minimal variety? Give me some like, change. And then that kind of helps me anchor in on like, okay, what they're already bringing in a very diverse group of people. And so I don't really have to worry about that angle because something is already working. Or like, wow, they do not have a diverse group already. So maybe I need to sort of think about that, try to add that into my calculus.
I love that question. That's a very coaching kind of question. It's not a finger pointing, how bad have you screwed this up? It's a, have you ever thought about
Yeah.
And suddenly, being very introspective and reflective and,
Yeah.
you know what? Maybe not. Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been a tremendous conversation.
Super fun.
I have appreciated your insights, your passion, and your just excitement for the space and willingness to share. If someone wants to connect with the incredible Peter Searcy, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn for sure. Yeah. So Peter Searcy, SURSI. I'm on LinkedIn. Just DM me, find me, chat with me. It'd be great.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much again for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. This has been so much fun. To everybody else out there, hang tight for another session coming right up. Right. Good stuff. That was so much fun. Enjoyed that thoroughly. And gosh, apparently there's a pumpkin spice something going around because the chat was blowing up. Everyone's excited about that. Everyone's pumped up about the different things that Peter kind of started off with there. I told you I'd give away a couple of books really quick for the Decoding Talent book. So bring those up really quick on screen so I can share that with you and make some people smile, hopefully over there. So Matthew, I saw you asking some questions around AI. I believe I picked these for the ones that were kind of chiming in during that session. And if you will all forgive me, Peter did this out of the kindness of his heart, and he was asking about AI and talking and coaching some people actually in the chat about how he's learning about it. So I'm going to give him a copy of that book as well, just because he volunteered his time with us today, and he was already kind of helping out and chiming in. So you all will get a copy of that book. Just ping Melanie, and she'll make sure we get that out to you. Actually, it won't get to you for a little while because the book is on pre-order. It comes out early next year, but we'll make sure and get that ordered and cemented and settled with the publisher, so you'll get the copy of that. All right, and then let's flip back over to the agenda really quick, George. I know you and I were talking about that a minute ago. I'm gonna shift two things around really quick. We're gonna have a session shortly come up and talk about internal hiring and talent. And then we're going to have the session on speeding up the hiring process, minimizing friction, how to make that experience for candidates a better experience, because we'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll just say, I want to pause though and ask you, George, because I've been watching this and learning and going through all these things. What stood out to you in the last session or the one before that? Was there something that you took a note on or saw a comment that really got your mind going?
Yeah, the word perfect. Like, I don't know if y'all can see, I'm still breaking out in hives. I had to go get some cream. I had to go get some something to drink and some sweetness. But the word perfect candidate, or in general, just perfect person. Listen, I've been married for 16 years, 2 weeks ago. I celebrate 16 years of marriage, and I am still not the perfect guy for my wife, and she's not the perfect girl. Now, she's perfect for me, but one thing that we understood growing is that in order to have a great relationship and a friendship, a businessship, is that we accepted the fact that I am not perfect. Like I'm okay with not being okay all the time, right? So often in the workplace, we feel like we got to have the perfect fit. It's got to be the perfect person. And I use a lot of the data analysis. I use a lot of the data-driven stuff for my team, but it's not because I want somebody who is perfect. I want somebody who has issues in the past that they've grown from and became a better person. I want somebody who failed 99 times, but hit a home run twice, right? Like Babe Ruth struck out over 1,300 times. He only hit 760 home runs. He was walked over 2,000 times, right? One of the greatest baseball players of all time. Michael Jordan made less shots in the clutch than he missed. Like he missed more of the most important shots, right? And so I feel like the word perfect sets us up for failure, right? And so like we just have to realize that like there's perfect people for us right now, but what makes the situation perfect long term is that we all accept we are humanity and there's no perfection within us. We are all going to fall, we're all going to fail, we're all going to hit a burnout wall, right? We try not to get there, but that burnout wall comes to us. We try to leave all our problems, not carry baggage within the workplace, but man, sometimes we drag it over the threshold of that door, or vice versa. We don't try to take problems home from work and frustrate our family, but sometimes we just have that day, and it's so important that we just relax and say, it's okay, I'm not perfect, and I mess up. That's important to me, I guess, and I think it's important for everybody to just accept that we're not perfect. I think I'll say this statement. When y'all were talking in that session, I started thinking, to get maximum attention, especially in today's world, we got so much social media, nothing just slips through the cracks. To get maximum attention, make a big mistake. Just make a mistake, period. If you want attention in the workplace, in the business, if you want the spotlight put on you, make a mistake. But if you want maximum damage, fail to admit it. I've admitted I made bad hires. I made bad implementations of systems and processes. But when you fail to admit those things, trying to stay perfect, it sets you back even more.
Wow. Goodness. I'm with you on that for sure. And it's one of the, I can't remember exactly who said it. So whoever said this, say it again in the chat, because it was great when you said it. But it was like, I don't want the person who's perfect. I want the person who's like screwed it up and hadn't come back. So whoever did that, that's what George and I were talking about. Like we all use.
I believe it was Shaw. It was Matt Shaw that made
Mike
that.
Shaw. That's right. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Mike.
There's no perfect people. There's just flawed and messed up. We're all flawed. We've all been like, everybody enjoys rain, but it's a frustration if you step in the mud, right?
Yes.
It messes up the perfection of something good.
Well, that comment from Tiffany there, I just saw come in. She said something. She saw the other day someone had, I'm not perfect, I'm amazing. And I love that, because every single one of us have that unique kind of flavor on things, and that's so much fun. Goodness gracious, that's exciting. Okay, so we're going to jump into. Was there one more thing? Sorry, George, I like jumped over you there. I know
I mean,
I schedule a little bit, but I wanted.
There's always more things, Ben.
There's always more.
We can go on and on.
I open the door.
I can save it for later.
I can't get it shut again if I open that door. Okay, we're going to jump into the session on looking at internal hiring, internal talents, looking at that as a resource and a tool and a potential opportunity for us to connect to the people we've already sold once to come and work with us. Why not look for them first for other opportunities when it makes sense? So we're going to dive into a session on that one. And then we're going to come back on speeding up the hiring process and those pieces of really creating a great candidate experience. I had so much fun, honestly, for all of you out there on this agenda, because we're touching all these different things with my hope that by the end, you're going to have some tools to apply to every part of the process as you're going through and trying to find the right people. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this piece on internal talent, and George and I will be back shortly. Hang tight.
Welcome back to another fun conversation here at the event. So excited to have you with us. And we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to talk about talent acquisition, but we're also going to talk about it through the lens of looking inside the business. So talent ability, internal hiring, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. We're going to talk about those things as part of this conversation, because I feel like if we're only talking about looking outside the business, we're missing a
not just a big chunk of talent we already have and have access to, but also the opportunity to not lose those people, hopefully. So here with us is Ken from SHL. He's going to talk to us about some of those things. We're going to dive into this discussion, and sir, glad to have you.
Great to be here, Ben, and hello, everyone.
So before we dive into that stuff, will you take just 1 second and tell everybody a little more about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. Yes, my name is Ken Lottie. I'm the Chief Science and Innovation Officer at SHL. SHL is global leader in talent assessment. So our focus is really on measuring talent and using that to predict on-the-job performance, retention, engagement outcomes. We work both in talent acquisition and talent management. My background is industrial, organizational, and psychology. So I've been interested in people at work for over 20 years.
Awesome. Wonderful. And so before you guys started recording, we were actually chatting back and forth about this because we feel like there's an opportunity here for employers to do some of these things that maybe in the past they haven't prioritized, right? And to look at talent of a different perspective. So I'd love to get your take on that. Why is it important? Why should we be thinking about these people within our four walls, whether we're virtual or in person, doesn't matter? Why should we think about them as part of this bigger hiring strategy?
Yeah, there's so many reasons, right? So part of it is you've made a huge investment. You've already got people who've learned a bit about your culture, about your operations, about the other team members, the cast of characters, and delivering your mission. So any switch, there's a switching cost involved with replacing those people that everyone here is acutely and painfully aware of. But even if you think about those people, not just in their role, but in a different role in your organization, yes, there's still an onboarding process, but not re-onboarding into the organization. So the people who are in the four walls, virtual or real, they already just know so much and they have such a huge advantage over just a general person off the street who may come in and may be a misfit for any number of reasons, right? So not just skills, but culture, team, manager, mission, etc. So you've already kind of ticked off a lot of the risk areas that you want to manage with the people you've already got. So that's the first thing. Second thing is obviously if you could keep them, then you don't have to replace them. And and your research points this out, Ben, one of the key ways to keep people is to give them exciting career opportunities within the business so that they don't feel like they're stuck and stagnant, that they can continue to progress and move through. The other one is just pure math though. I mean, even if you've got kind of horrific turnover, depending on the industry, that number might vary, but let's call it 20%. It would take you fully 5 years to replace all the people in your organization. So, and that's the 5 years is several organizational lifetimes in some industries. So, if you're waiting on your talent acquisition strategy to kind of fundamentally change your talent pool, I think you're going to be waiting quite a while. But the people you have available to you are the people that are the most available to you to make these talent decisions.
Yes, absolutely. We use the word risk in there. And one of the things we did a study about 2 years ago, and one of the big takeaways I got in that was when we look at and use the interim people we have and move them to other roles or help them, this isn't about picking you up and moving you around like a chess piece, right? We can't influence that from a leadership perspective, but it's also about saying, hey, Ken is really great at analyzing data. Let's find another place for him to do that inside the business. Or let's put that skill set to work somewhere else. And what excites me in the research we saw that it's less risky to do that overall, right? And you talk about all kinds of risk in that quick answer, the risk of a team connection, of a manager connection, of the culture piece, like all those kinds of things. Every one of those is an unknown that who knows what's going to happen with that. And one of the other things that you said is we have this people right here already within reach. And one of my favorite sayings is gather a bouquet of flowers from those within reach. We always think that the best ones are somewhere like way off there, or we think that the only way to get the right person for this job is to go and post it and look for that one person that exists in the entire world that could possibly do this. And we both know how silly that is when you say it. Yes. Today, right now, someone is doing that somewhere. They're posting a job like, I'm going to get that person that's going to do this. And they think that there's only one out there. It's folly. It's silly. And yet it's a common practice, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we say like, it's so easy, like we'll just hire from within, but so it might be worth getting into why doesn't everyone do that already? Or why doesn't it happen a lot more? One of the things that I've seen as scientists kind of studying this, with talent acquisition, assessment gets brought in usually for those like big critical roles. That's where a company would start putting in formal talent assessment programs. So they're, their high volume roles or their critical kind of first line leadership roles. I think the way that assessment gets brought in on the talent management side is quite a bit different. And kind of not always, you don't always have access to the same amount of data. So think about the investment that they're putting into these TA programs. They're going in, they're actually like studying the job or the job family. They're coming up with these evidence-based role profiles and then kind of hiring against that. But organizations, at least in our experience, really only do that for a handful of their biggest talent acquisition challenges. They don't even do that for all their hiring. And I think the challenge is the data. And it's not just the data about people. That's our specialty, is, give people tests and assessments and interviews and tell you what that means in terms of competencies and skills. I think the challenge is actually on the job side of it as much as anything, and defining for a given job, what is the actual role profile. Now, every organization and everyone watching this would say, well, we have job descriptions for all of our jobs, and, but are they real? Are they right? Are they accurate? So the effort that's invested for these big TA programs is getting a lot of people's input, looking at kind of average responses, looking at, consensus on what are the competencies and skills required. That's not typically the quality of data we have for internal role profiles and descriptions for the other 98% of the jobs in the business. And I think it makes it really difficult, even for the well-meaning manager or talent manager or employee, to know what's out there. Like, what other jobs do we have in our business that I would be good at, or that would represent the next step for me, besides the one I can see right in front of me, besides the one that's directly in my career path, that has the level title one up from the one that I have in my function. Outside of that, the map of where someone could go, it's all terra incognita. I mean, it's completely unknown and unmapped in terms of the role profiles in any kind of reliable sense. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges to this, even if people take the responsibility personally and as managers and put talent systems in place. I think there's still like a root cause data issue related to just, what does it take to be successful in role A versus role X versus, another one in finance. And how do we make those connections so that we really can get the best people doing their best work kind of across the business?
That's one of the reasons I'm really intrigued by the work that you and the team are doing, because this isn't just Ben's wet finger in the air trying to guess what those might be, but you actually have the data to back that up and say, hey, wait a minute, these are the 3 critical things that you've got to have for that job. And while that seems like a world away from where you are currently, it's actually, this much of an overlap in those jobs and those critical competencies. I think that's a really powerful way to look at this, because it feels like if you don't know someone over there, or you're not exposed to that, then the world around you, the number of openings that you can think about or consider it's pretty small from an employee perspective. One of the things we see in the data too, just to give everybody out there kind of a peek into the mind of a learning professional, because they're also trying to solve this problem from their different lane. One of the things that they do is they say, we're going to try to make all these career opportunities that we have, the career ladders or lattice or however, make those available so people could see what other opportunities exist. But it's hard to take action on that the same way that you can when you're thinking about it from a talent acquisition perspective. In the research, then the biggest way that TA leaders are trying to solve for this problem is we're going to use the tools we have, just make it as open and transparent as we can about what opportunities are out there, so you can self-select in at the right moments. Again, that's not perfect, because you're missing some of those aspects that we're talking about. Do I know that I'm a fit? It's just based on interest at this point, but it allows you at least to start seeing some other opportunities, because I've said for a long time, if you don't help someone visualize a path inside the business, they'll visualize it somewhere else when they get called by the competition about that job opening they have. They'll get pulled away.
I think we already stumbled into kind of like there's 2 big sides to solving this thing. One is the scaling one that we're talking about, where we know how to go and study a job, or we know how to come up with credible, believable, defensible profiles, but it's hard to scale that process because it requires kind of getting input. It requires some professional judgment to summarize that. and to say definitively, this is what it takes to be a successful supervisor in a call center or whatever. And that can change across businesses. In fact, some of the recent research that our team conducted showed that it can actually vary by business objectives, or what we call business challenges that you're facing. So not only is it the case that, you need certain competencies to be a leader in finance or HR or sales, but it actually can vary based on what the specific kind of part of the organizational life cycle you're in and what you're trying to do. Are you kind of growing? Are you consolidating and cost optimizing? And those things will actually change the skill requirements of the managers as well. So it's kind of not the case that a leader is a leader is a leader. So that's the scaling bit though. And then I think there's the piece of like, what kind of information is the right information anyway? And it gets you down into the performance versus potential path. So, how would let's say we knew the math, but we knew the career ladders, and you had HR technology that was helping you scale these processes, and you could post the roles and everyone could see them. There's still, how do I know that I could do that? How do I know that I would be successful in that? And it's probably less of a personal decision. Most people would probably just take the shot, not everybody. But it's actually, how do I get other people to see me in that potential stretch assignment and that potential new role? So some of the science work that we've been doing, a little less on the tech side just yet, is actually trying to unpack each competency and think about it in terms of, there's kind of the easy version of a competence. Let's just take makes fast decisions. So making fast decisions is important in a lot of jobs, not every job. But you can imagine making fast decisions as a day trader looks different than making fast decisions as a call center rep, which kind of looks different from making fast decisions as like a nuclear engineer watching, power dials or something where, speed might have different consequences in each of those different jobs. So what does that actually mean then in terms of, well, you're good at fast decisions and you're currently in a call center role. Would you be a good nuclear engineer? Like, can you make that leap right away? And kind of thinking about not just, is this competency the same, or do these competencies overlap between jobs, but actually within competencies, kind of peeling and spreading them out and saying there's different levels of sophistication within the competency, such that you could be really good at making fast decisions for the simple version of fast decisions. And you might still have some development required before you could step into the next level role, maybe moving from a call center rep to a team leader or something like that. You're still making fast decisions, but they're more impactful and they require a little bit more consideration, a slightly different process. So it's that same competency. You see the overlap, but there's still actually a ladder within the competency. So I think that ties really well into the L&D world that we were talking about before. And that's a lot of my team's been spending a lot of time on that issue over the past year. We're really kind of taking our competency model and spreading each one of those out and being able to map that then back to the world of work and organizations and try to produce these career lattices.
Really incredible. We'll have to compare notes offline. So I'm deeply interested in that. For everybody else out there, while you're listening into this, by the way, we're about to start wrapping up. But one of the things that, as Kim was talking, I was thinking about is, I wonder what those kind of key competencies are in our space as HR leaders, but also talent acquisition leaders, hiring leaders, those kind of things. But also, do those things adapt and change, like Ken was saying, for a fast-moving organization where we're doubling in growth every year, or for an organization that we're stable, right? We're trying to consolidate. We're trying to operationalize and be more efficient, things like that. So I'd be curious to hear from some of you out there listening in. What would you describe a great leader in some of those kind of areas, depending on the different space you're in or the phase your company's in, even the cycle there? Because I think some interesting differentiators in those. Ken, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for this. This has been so much fun to just chat with you for a few minutes on this. I can tell you're super excited about it. We both love the data. We both love the numbers and things. But I was telling a friend this morning, the reason I get so excited about the things we're doing here is not because it's just a bunch of data and numbers, but because every single number and data point out there is a person and their life and their family, and we get a chance to impact people in a really positive and powerful way. So I appreciate you for your passion for this stuff and for doing the work that you're doing. It's really incredible.
Thanks a lot for that. And yeah, same here, Ben. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you now and before and in the future. Thanks for giving us access to the audience, and thanks everyone for your interest in a little bit of the science behind what we're working on here.
Awesome. And before I forget, we're at the wrap up. Everybody, Ken mentioned our research earlier. Thank goodness to him, because I forgot it in a moment. But we actually did a great report with the team over at FHL. We'll make sure and link that in the comments now, so you can see that. Go get it, check it out, because it's incredible. And it was a ton of fun to work with them on that and look at this through a different perspective. As if you're an organization right now that's trying to lean into how to do this, it'll give you some ideas for building your business case. It'll give you some points and things like Ken and I talked about today about the gaps and things to think through to help you do that better. So I hope you will go and check that out. We'll make sure to pop it in the link right now. So thank you to all of you. Thank you again, Ken. We appreciate you as a team, what you're doing, and we'll catch you in another session shortly.
Right. We're having so much science today. I saw someone in the chat a few minutes ago say they're glad to see all the IO psych, background, and all those people that are, the scientists and everything else, chatting and showing up today for this. Really quickly, we're going to jump right over into our next conversation. We're going to hear from Adam Bird at Chronify, and we're going to talk about some new data they gathered this year around what it takes to create a better experience in the hiring process, the importance of speed when it comes to turning around and responding to candidates and getting all the pieces aligned in the hiring process, because we talk about time to fill, and it's just all it is a measure of the beginning and the end of the process. And so we're going to dive deeper into how to speed up certain parts of that hiring process so that we can be more effective, be more efficient, but also create a better experience that makes candidates actually want to continue with us. We're not going to drag this thing out over time. And so Adam is an expert in that space, and the work that Chronify does there with helping companies to do the scheduling pieces, they have a lot of knowledge, insight there, and the conversation around the research is a ton of fun for me as well. So we'll dive into this, and I'll make sure and post a link towards the end of this session of some of the resources and things that you can find over from Chronify, some things on how to hire and how hiring is changing in the middle of all the stuff we're going through, those kinds of things. So hang tight. Here comes Adam.
Big UX here. And so glad to have you here with us for this conversation today. We're diving into different things, different aspects, different focal points of talent acquisition, what's happening in the space. And this next conversation is going to be one that I think you'll all really enjoy. You're ready to take some notes. He's going to give some good stats and data things, but also probably I'll be sharing some stories to help illustrate this really well. So I have Adam Bird here with me from Chronify. We're going to talk about scheduling and how to create a good experience for candidates and how to make it frictionless and all those kinds of things that we're all worried about day to day. So Adam, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So before we dive into some of that fun stuff, would you take a minute and tell the audience a little more about who you are and what you do, please?
Yes, thanks, Ben. So I'm a technologist. I've been building software systems for years, and I've been particularly interested over the last 6-7 years in scheduling in general. And naturally, that's led me very deeply into the interview scheduling problem, because it's a problem that affects so many organizations and so many industries. So what my company builds the software that powers scheduling embedded into lots of other applications. So we've worked with product teams across a range of ATSs. So people like iSIMS, UKG, Clear Company, they're all using Chronify to power scheduling in their applications. And that's given us a really unique insight and an understanding of the breadth of different ways people are looking to schedule interviews and the problems that surface.
Awesome. Great. I remember talking to you for the first time, and I was thinking about how much data you probably have your hands on across these companies. Like, this is incredible. You think about how this picture and this perspective you have, because each one of us individually, we can see what's happening in our little narrow slice of the world, but you get to see this bigger picture. So to put it again, the world out there is intense right now from a hiring perspective. And our research shows that people are leaving, and employees are leaving because of stress and burnout. And the problem is, then they step right over into this very stressful hiring experience for a lot of companies, right? Would you talk about some of the things that you're seeing and hearing in and around that, please?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we've been working with lots of software companies helping recruiters, and there was lots of anecdotes, and we always talk to our friends. We've all been through these processes,
but actually we realized there's very little data on what the candidates were actually experiencing. So there's plenty of research around how recruiters were feeling, but less so about the candidates. So we commissioned some primary research, and we actually kind of interviewed 6,500 candidates across the UK, US, France, and Germany to really understand what their experience was and how they were being treated, if you like, through the interview process. And that really, it backs up the anecdotes, but in many ways, it kind of revealed that the anecdotes were just the tip of the iceberg. And things like brand impact were a really significant concern when you're going through the recruiting flow. So to give you an idea, about 62% of senior candidates across the world had left an interview process because of interview scheduling delays. Now, bear in mind that a lot of work goes into getting a senior candidate into a process. And if essentially 2/3 of them are leaving, you can kind of read those stats in two ways. One is that you're missing out on that talent, but actually the people that are staying with you, do you actually want them part of your organization? Because they're kind of, frankly, if you genuinely want to interact with the best people and want to be recruiting the best people, they're kind of self-selecting themselves out of if your process is poor. And yes, that does skew more senior, but I think it's tempting to think about kind of senior candidates as the primary opportunity, but I think that's more about that candidate's expectation. Their candidate's expectation is that as a senior candidate, I expect to be treated very, very well. Whereas a more junior candidate will just kind of accept what they're given to a certain extent. But if you, an organization, can give them a senior candidate experience, then you're absolutely going to stand out, and you're going to be picking from the cream of the talent that's available in the marketplace. So these kind of interact, and the other side of it, I think, what really came out loud and clear from the candidates was human touch. So 50% pretty much of candidates, especially in France, it was 59%, Germany 48%, of wanted the human touch. And it kind of, recruiters are people. They like people. Their job is to understand and see whether that candidate is going to fit into the organization, but also share with the candidate whether that organization is going to be right for them. That's how they can be effective at that job. The challenge they've got, if they're spending lots of time on admin, they have no time to be present. They have no time to do the valuable bit of their job. They're just doing admin. So, and candidates want to feel like they're part of that process. And that's not umpteen emails. That's just make it happen for me, make it streamlined, and make it personalized for me. So that's the key themes that came out. But on top of all of that was about 70% of people said the interview experience affected their brand perception of that company. And so that's you as a potential vendor of things to that person, be that broadband, eating at a restaurant, etc. But also whether or not they're going to recommend you to their friends and colleagues, or whether they're going to talk about in glowing terms on social media. There's like 2/3 of people will think, actually, no, I had a poor experience. I now think less of that brand.
There was I was talking with a friend yesterday. I said, I just told you before we started recording, that's my family and I went on a 4-hour drive, each way earlier this week. And one of the things that I realized out there is that for many of those companies, so the customer facing ones, the public facing ones like you're talking about, for some of them, their employer brand is up there on par in terms of visibility with everything else, because there's a brand new restaurant being built down the road. Here's our logo and we're hiring. Here's our link to our job site. Here's a link to how to apply with us. Here's a link to connect with a recruiter. And especially right now, as tough as things are, as challenging as the environment is, that's becoming more and more a priority for companies that are high volume, that are public facing, however you want to describe that. And that's an opportunity. But if you don't have some of the things behind that to actually support it, to enable your recruiting teams to be effective and to enable your recruiting teams to do the right things, like you're saying, you're churning away at all the activities that don't actually add value or create a better experience for those candidates. And you're going to find out it's going to cost you at some point. Right now, you might not realize it, but at some point you're going to realize, we missed that great candidate, like you're talking about, right? That senior person for that key role. That starts to add up over time, a compounding negative cost, I guess, is how I think about it.
Yes, we all know the effects of a less than great hire can have on an organization, especially at senior, because that then sets the bar for who they hire and who they bring into the organization.
I'm making notes over here, as you can tell. I'm still paper pen up here. Thinking about one of the sayings that we used to have when I was encouraging our leaders to hire someone that made them a lot comfortable was, A players will hire other A players. You'll hire someone that's smarter than you to challenge you. A B player will hire a C player because they don't want to be challenged. They don't want someone to step up and push them or to be smarter than them. They want someone that they can kind of keep their thumb on or tell them where to go or what to do or how to do it. And that's intriguing. I hadn't thought about it through that lens. So that is really interesting. I'm going to push back on you a little bit though. So you said candidates want a human touch. And one of the things the thing that your company does is to help to automate this parts of this process, the scheduling, the piece of the process that often is very frustrating. Is that not keeping people at arm's length? Talk about how that enables other kinds of things, if you don't mind, because I think that's one of the pushbacks I've heard. People like, yeah, we want a human experience, but then we're going to add some algorithms into the mix, and that feels like they're at opposites of the spectrum.
I do actually, in many ways, it's not really algorithms. I think candidates aren't daft. Candidates can have an Uber turn up in 5 minutes. Candidates can order a pizza and have that in their house in 15 minutes. Why can't they schedule an interview with 2 clicks on their phone? We're living in a world now where technology is being used to kind of remove admin. It's just anything that's superfluous is not essential to the engagement should just be removed. And that's what technology can do. And back to my kind of point around recruiters, and that give them time to establish that relationship, to better represent the company, build that rapport with the candidate so the candidate feels valued. Just because it's automated doesn't mean it can't be personalized. In many ways, actually the other way around, actually through intelligent use of automation, you can give the candidate a really personalized, streamlined experience that just gets out of the way. And they recognize that the organization is deploying resources effectively. And all this is set in stone in the same way that you do with assessments, to do with kind of CV parsing. Interview scheduling is one of those things candidates expect from a forward-thinking organization now.
I'm with you on that. I wanted to give you that chance to kind of call back to that one, because again, I advocated really heavily for it in the book and in a lot of conversations. Many companies have already leaned down on it, but some are still kind of pulling back to say, yeah, but I'm not sure, or is the experience really that good? And the way that I usually put it, so I don't know if this resonates with you, is I think about the things that I had to do as a recruiter, day to day, all the activities. There's this to-do list, and at the top was respond to those candidates, get those things scheduled, and always push that off, for 2 or 3 days. And then I hated that process. But scheduling, things like that. At the bottom was, how do we create a better brand for our company? How do we make sure that we have this pipeline of great candidates so that when that thing opens up, we're proactive instead of reactive? And all those things at the bottom list, I can never quite get to because I was always doing this stuff up here at the very top. Right? Does that make sense to you? Like that's how I always raise and position it.
Yeah. Because like I think it's if you can remove admin, then you can do high value tasks. That's it. That's the purpose. That's what technology should be used for, to free people up to be humans rather than automatons. And let the computers do the automaton bit, and let the humans do the human bit.
One of the questions one of the questions we asked in our research this year, so we'll do some dueling research because you were sharing from the candidate perspective. We asked employers, we asked recruiting leaders about if you're using some sort of automation in hiring, what does that mean? What are you doing with that freed up time? Right? Are you hanging out on Facebook? Are you doing something actually valuable with your time? And the number one way they were spending time was communicating with candidates and sourcing candidates. Right. Now that we have more time, we're going to go find the candidates we couldn't dig for before because we didn't have time. But we're going to spend more time really engaging and connecting with people and having deeper and more meaningful conversations instead of this surface level, I'm pushing you along the treadmill because I don't have time to do anything other than that.
Yeah. And that's borne out with our research, that kind of what candidates want and see. And like I said, it skews more senior, kind of have an expectation. And this is why you can really differentiate it. If you're doing that with kind of mid to more junior candidates, because most organizations just aren't doing that. They're not seeing that value.
So we talked through
some scheduling things and how to put yourself out there as an employer, how to represent your company well and all those kinds of things. What advice would you give to the recruiting leaders listening in right now? Because they're in the thick of it. They're in the heat of battle. They're, whatever metaphor we want to use, they're in it. So what advice would you give them? What recommendations or encouragement even would you give them in the middle of what they're facing right now? Because it is definitely more challenging than anything I ever faced when I was recruiting. And so I have a lot of empathy for what they're facing as well as.
It's a genuinely crazy time. I won't use the U word, that's overused at the minute, but it's genuinely crazy. I think with all introduction of any change, that change is hard and change is something that has to be considered. I think the most important thing to do is not try and change everything. It's not say, right, all of our interviews are going to be scheduled in this way. All of our CVs are going to be done in this way. You don't make a wholesale change overnight, because there'll always be differences, and you want to kind of maintain your unique approach as a recruitment function. So I would encourage, say, okay, is there a particularly difficult set of interviews or type of interviews that are kind of low hanging fruit, as you will, or high value items? And the two things we see are, there's the kind of screening interview. Can we just automate that process? So you go through the process, and then you can send a personalized link out to the candidate automatically to schedule in with the recruiter to do the screening interview, or the hiring manager, or whoever's doing that process. Is that, because that's a volume task. So if you can kind of remove that, then that can be super valuable in terms of time saved. And then the other side is, okay, what are the super complicated interview kind of scenarios that you're dealing with? So increasingly what we're seeing, where people are kind of perhaps replacing the concept of a panel interview, where they have sort of 3 people in a room or on a Zoom call at once, with, you've got to see these 3 people in a morning. Now, what they're doing is saying, okay, candidate, can you tell me, a couple of mornings you're free over the next couple of weeks? Hold that thought. I'm now going to go away and negotiate with the hiring managers and find a time that works, and do the kind of the Tetris and the kind of the jigsaw puzzle to try and find a time for you. And actually, you can use technology to say, actually, here's a link, candidate, to a list of 3 different pools of people you need to speak to. You just pick a day, and the technology works it out. And so, and a lot of that where we're discovering is there's an expectation that that's just too complicated. It's like, I can't even conceive how that can be done. And actually it can. We can make that process personalized and seamless for the candidate and the recruiter and the hiring manager in such a way that massive, we have companies where there are people's role is dedicated to setting up just one type of interview because it's so complicated, and because they're trying to save the hiring manager's time rather than the recruiter's time. So look at those. Where are you spending your time? Is it on kind of simple volume things, or is it on complex things? And just pick one of those to start. And what that gives you is real evidence that it's improving the experience, because you can talk to candidates after the process and get their feedback and understand, talk to hiring managers. And then that's the other side, I think, often is forgotten in the conversations. We talk about that kind of recruiter candidate dynamic. The hiring manager dynamic is super important. And often you need the hiring manager to buy into, okay, fine, I'm going to give you access to my calendar, and I'm happy to do interviews on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoons, and I'm going to trust you to do that for me. Get that buy-in, because otherwise, if the hiring manager is not bought into, okay, I've got to commit some time to hiring these people, then that's going to be really tricky as well. So you need to kind of demonstrate to all your internal stakeholders, this is what we've achieved with this one problem. Imagine what we could achieve if we go to the next biggest problem and the next biggest problem, and look at the kind of impact this is having. We're getting candidates through the process far more quickly. Our time to hire on this role we applied this particular technology to has reduced by 50%. They are powerful stats which can then get buy-in from the entire team.
Awesome. Well, that was kind of a walkthrough on how to do a pilot almost, right? To just test this out.
I think pilot is the key. I've been in technology for far too many years. And so it always goes wrong if people just try and eat the whole pie in one go. That pick off a slice, see whether it's tasty, give it to other people, and then you can start doing the rest of the the pie to carry on the metaphor.
Suddenly I'm hungry now. Well, I love that example though, because one of the things we didn't talk about in this is, again, I'm thinking back to the pain points that I had around scheduling and getting candidates to show up at the right times, things like that. One of the problems was we'd have this thing all set, and then suddenly it's, oh, I suddenly have a doctor's appointment, or the manager has to be out because they have a sick child, and we have to restart the clock entirely. And you have to go back, okay, now give me another set of slots that you're available and everything else. And that's such a pain. That's the problem of the back and forth, but also like a last minute change throws the whole thing in disarray. And what you're talking about here is, oh, you know what? Here's a new link. Let's redo this. It doesn't require us to reconfigure everything, move, heaven and earth just to get this back aligned. It's pretty quick and easy to reset that. And that time, that lag, there was one time we had a hiring manager have to leave for a vacation, and something came up last minute. It was 3 weeks before he could see the candidate. And when he came back, the candidate had already accepted an offer and was gone. And so that was kind of a weird example in the moment. But today you don't have 3 weeks. You don't have 2 weeks to circle back with a candidate, try to find times. Things are moving much too quickly. And just like here in the States, at least, you can't go and make an offer on a house and hope that house is still going to be there a week later. It's going to probably be gone already. The same thing is happening on the candidate side too, that they're getting multiple offers and you're going to miss your chance, miss that window if you have this process that drags out and requires all these other moving parts just to work perfectly every time to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really, really important point there. Is people talk to me as a technologist and think I want to kind of automate everything. No, I want to get people out of the way. And what I've learned is actually, you think in terms of less about automation, more about streamlining. And it's about streamlining processes. So if you do need to step in for those exceptions, that's what humans do very well. They understand, okay, this one meeting needs moving because this particular hiring manager can't do that sequence. We'll leave the rest of the sequences as they are. We'll send just a link to the candidate, or even just phone the candidate or email, say, look, we need to change this particular one. There's nothing stopping going back to a conventional process where it makes sense. What we're doing is saying 95% of the time, just make it easy, make it sorted. But at that point where the recruiter needs to be human again, we should facilitate that. And whatever technology solution you put in place shouldn't stand in the way of doing that. It should put things in calendars, update the ATS, and then get out of the way. And so the recruiter carries on just working in the zone that they're already in.
So my big takeaways, the high performing candidates, the senior candidates that everybody really wants are the ones that are going to have the least tolerance for a whole process. But streamlined, it's not just automation, it's streamlining. I like that differentiation there. And then you also said another word that now I've just lost. But essentially it's about, let's focus this thing on the right things, right? From a researcher or from a recruiter perspective, let's focus on the right priorities instead of these other things that if we get to hand that off, there's other things that are more valuable we could be putting our hand to if we had that availability. So I got some really good notes from this. I hope everybody out there was taking some notes on the stats and things too. If someone wants to connect with Chronify, wants to learn more about the research you talked about or some of the other things you're doing, how you're serving employers, what's the best way to connect?
Chronify.com, CRONOFY.com. Our blog is chock full of all sorts of research and insights from HR leaders, and certainly the research there. Or contact me. I'm Adam at Chronify.com, and I'm happy to kind of put you in touch with the appropriate people.
Wonderful. Well, Adam, I've enjoyed this thoroughly. It's fun to talk to someone else I'm not a technologist by trade as you are, but I've come to love it for the ability to help us focus more on the human pieces of hiring, of employee experience, of candidate experience, those kinds of things. And so this has been a really fun conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate the time.
With everybody else out there, stay tuned. We'll have more coming up shortly. All right. Goodness, I am enjoying this so much good stuff. As you could tell, George and I had some fun earlier, kind of catching up and focused on priorities and everything else, and just following the chat and all the great conversations there. So I want to jump right into our very last session because we're running up close to time. We're going to jump into our last conversation, which is just 14 minutes only. And we're going to talk about
some of the things that you heard at the very beginning today, I thought it was kind of fun to wrap the day with some of those things about telling your story, talking about your brand, because one of the key ideas that you're going to hear is that that should not be the last thing on our list, but the first thing on our list. I don't want to spoil it any more than that. So I'm going to bring in our last conversation with Patty and Michelle and hear from them about how to tell your story as an employer, because I think that's one of the most important things. We leave it as a last resort or a last minute kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, by the way, how do we, they're coming today. How do we tell the candidate about us? And you should be thinking through that story long before that ever happens. So let's hear from Patty and Michelle on that.
And welcome back to our event, our conversation, our opportunity to kind of lift up the talent acquisition profession today. Hope you've enjoyed some of the other conversations at the event, and we're getting closer to the end. And I wanted to have one last really hard-hitting conversation around how to help you stand out from the sea of other companies out there and tell your story and those kind of things. So we have not just one, but two panelists here to talk about that. I'm so excited because Patty is an expert in recruiting. Michelle's an expert in marketing. And so we're going to talk about those two things and how they come together around your brand and how to tell that story really well. So ladies, welcome. Glad to have both of you here.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Thanks, Ben. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Before we dive into that, I want to give you just a minute each to tell everybody who you are and what you do, just to give them some insight, because I already talked you up a little bit, but let them know a little more about who you are and what you do. So Michelle, would you please go first?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. My name is Michelle Creer. I'm the SVP of Sales and Marketing for an agency called Lineage Marketing. We work with companies in the talent and technology industry. I've been in marketing my entire career, 25 plus years, and spent some time leading marketing for a global RPO as well. So really deep knowledge and expertise, not only of marketing, but certainly of recruitment marketing and the challenges that organizations face when it comes to attracting and finding and retaining talent.
Awesome. Wonderful. And Patty, please.
Yeah, good day, everyone. I'm Patty Silver, and I serve as the Executive Vice President for Aspire's Talent Strategy and Acquisition Practice. We're a leading RPO provider throughout North America. And a lot of what we do is bring together this holistic approach of the employer brand and recruiting best practices to help organizations attract and retain top talent. Most of my career was spent in the employer branding space, recruitment marketing space with an ad agency that specialized in this area. So employer branding and employee value proposition is near and dear to my heart because I believe that's a foundational piece to recruiting overall.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being here. So one of the things that we started off the day with, actually, we had a pair of talent acquisition executives talking about their priorities, things like that. And what's interesting is I expected the conversation to go in this direction. It ended up going in that direction. And they talked about briefly the importance of your EDP, right? What you're offering, how you're offering it, how you tell that story, those kind of things. And so I'm so glad we have this opportunity to go deeper into that, to really plumb the depths and help people understand some practical tools for that. And Patty, if you don't mind kind of kicking us off, talk about why that's important, I guess. Tell us about why that matters. Out of all the things that you have to do, why should this be on that to-do list?
Well, as I said at the beginning, Ben, it's really the foundational piece to any recruiting strategy, right? That has to be the component that you're leading with when you're engaging with talent, because they have to know who you are, what they're going to get as a result of exchanging their talents to you, what you're going to bring to them to create that mutual benefit. So it's just as if you're buying a product, right? You're really looking at it as a way as to how is this going to enhance my life at some point. So when we think of the employer brand, it is really the beginning piece of the recruiting process of engaging with that talent. One is their brand recognition of who you are, what your product or service brings to the marketplace, and then where do I fit as a candidate? And so we always love to equip our recruiting team members with that story. How do they articulate that to the candidate, and making sure that the storyline gels with what that candidate is looking for today? Because people are really looking for a way in which they can attach themselves to that brand. And that EVP is really the feeling It's not the tagline that people will use, right? The Nike kind of just do it slogan. It's just that, it's a slogan. But a brand is a feeling. It's that what you get in your gut to say, I really love working for this organization because in exchange for what I bring, this is what the organization gives to me. They give me professional development. They help me grow. I receive a fair wage and compensation. Benefits are great. I've got flexible working arrangements. They're open to my needs relative to, I'm a parent. And in today's situation where schools close, I have to have flexibility to go pick my kids up, right? Off the bus or wherever they're coming from because of something happening. And so employers who really understand their workforce and what the labor market's looking for really have that edge.
I love that. So, Michelle, as someone who spent your days in marketing, right, in and around that space, part of your job is to create feelings in people, create emotions, right, draw them in. And so, talk about that aspect if you don't mind, like how. That's a great, I love how Patty's talking about connecting it to these things that we're doing and the why behind the business. And here's the impact we're having. And like those things tell a big story. But what advice would you give someone, Michelle, around how to craft that? Because I know lots of people in the recruiting space. I was a recruiter one time, and most of them are not, lit majors or journalism. Like that's not our background. So what advice would you give someone to help craft that story or to create that connection with their audience they're trying to reach?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think a lot of companies are exactly to your point, not sure where to start or what to do. And I think on top of it all, a lot has changed in the past 18 months. So maybe what you were talking about pre-COVID has changed. I mean, we're all working from home now, right? We are not in office. We are not able to talk about the same things that are compelling to not only our employees, but to candidates as well. So we have to revisit that. And I think it's really important to start by looking at what are the things that you're offering right now. You can't make this up. You cannot just come up with a list of um, points that you think are going to be compelling to somebody. You have to look inside. As Patty said, it's intangible. It's happening already, but really bringing that forth is the hardest part. And there's some great guides out there. Patty actually has one of them that she provided at a webinar she and I did about a year ago. And I'm sure she'd be happy to send that to anybody who's interested. But there's a process that you go through of really understanding what is it that we offer, not only to candidates, but again, to our employees. What are those perks? What are those benefits? What is the value that you get from working here? And part of it is some of the things that Patty talked about, right? There's your pay, there's the benefits, there's professional development. Wellness right now is so incredibly important for every organization out there with the crazy level of burnout that we are seeing across the board. But really understanding kind of what we call it the essence at Clearange. What is the essence of your organization, the heart? What is the thing that is really intangible and gets people excited? It's about working for you, and it's unique to you. It's one of the things we talk to our clients about all the time. Everybody has one. It's just a matter of bringing it forward. So again, it's not something you can manufacture, but it's something you have to identify. And it's really about looking inward and asking your internal stakeholders, what are the things that you really enjoy about working for this organization? What keeps you here? And again, it's obviously the pay and some of the benefits, but there's something else there. And it's really, I don't know, I get excited about this because it's magical when you can actually put your finger on it and talk about it externally. And it's, again, something that if you're not feeling equipped to handle internally, there's guides out there that can help you. There's, exercises like Patty leads you through. There's company like ours that can help you as well. But there's definitely ways to go about really uncovering what that is and then taking that to market.
I'd forgotten about it until just now when you were saying some of those things, but I got to hear the vice president of HR for you were the name of her organization, but the nonprofit, the Pancreatic Cancer Coalition or something like that. And she was talking about, everybody else in the group was talking about, we're turning over people left and right. She said, we're losing some people, but our why is really big. And that connects with people on a personal, very deep level because they usually come to us because they have a personal connection. They have a family connection. They have a friend that passed away from the disease. So they have this connection to us that's not
transient. It's not $1 more an hour and I'm out the door. They're connecting on a deeper level. And so I love how you're both talking about, you've got to look inside. I love that Patty talked about it being a feeling, talk about being the essence, like those things. We're here talking about very hard hitting and challenging things. It's a feeling, but it truly is. And I've said it for a long time. It's hard to quantify what something feels like. It's hard to say, well, that's exactly worth this dollar amount, but you can start to quantify that when you look at, if we're not telling that story, if we're not doing those things, we're going to not only lose people, but we're going to find it very hard to attract others to come here. If we're muddled in our message, if we're not clear about the why, or if it's, you could trade dollars for hours, which is essentially how most of us approach a job offer. It's like, here's the amount of money that you're going to earn. And that's our value to you. And they can get that anywhere. What things do you have that nobody else does? Patty, what are the
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you started by saying, recruiters aren't lit majors. They're not, marketing experts. But I think that's really what needs to change today, right? Recruiters typically talk about, this is the requirements of the job. This is what the role does. This is how you'll sort of work inside of that business unit or that area. But what I've come to uncover is the fact that they don't have that marketing slant. They don't think like a marketer to really go out and figure out, how do I write a message that's going to be compelling, to really speak to the heart of what this looks like. Because if I'm a data scientist at one company and I'm looking at an opportunity in another, and I look at the requirements and they match exactly what I'm doing here, what is the difference? What is going to be compelling for somebody to make that switch, right? And so you'll go through your recruiting process and vetting them against their educational credentials, what they do in their job. Yes, it sort of fits this role, but where they miss, where recruiters are going to lose, is breaking it down and saying, so let's talk about what's important to you. Why do you like the company where you are? What do they have? And figuring out how to overcome an objection with a positive to say, this is what the environment looks like. And I think it's really a behavior change and a training change. It doesn't mean that somebody has to come in as a marketing major. They just need to have a behavioral change to understand how to make that story really, really unique to the individual in which they're speaking to, that really stands out. And part of that is conjuring up that feeling, creating that emotional connection, and now moving away from the job description as a whole and speaking to the individual to say, this is the difference you can make in this organization. This is what you can do to take us to the next level of our bigger strategy within the business. And this is where we're heading. And people get energized by that, right? They're excited about that story to say, I can see myself doing that. And I think that's where, you go back to that lit major. You don't need to be a lit major, right? You have all the components. It's just, how do I put it together to be able to create the story?
And just to quickly add on to that too, Patty, I completely agree. Think about how many times you have somebody who has started a new job and 30 days in, they're like, what have I done? It's not really because of the job. It's the culture. It's the environment. It's the company. It's all those things that they actually didn't dig in about during that whole interview process. And it wasn't a good cultural alignment, I think, a lot of times.
Both. That's so true. So for the audience out there listening right now, I'm going to encourage you. Okay. You heard from both of these incredibly sharp ladies here. Tell your story, right? To get the feeling. I think Kathy's word, or Patty's word, conjure up that feeling. Right? Take some time to really dwell on that a little bit. And the very first thing, if you didn't catch it out there listening, the very first thing they said was, this is what everything else is built on. So if you start doing the to-do list and you save this for the end, everything else is going to be reworked in order to fit that. So start with this. Don't put it at the bottom of the list, put it at the top of the list, because once you understand that, is it going to make everything easy as? No, absolutely not. But it will help you to tell that story. It will help you to connect with people. It will help you to, hopefully, if you're telling the right story and you're sharing this broadly, maybe the people that are working with you will get re-energized. That is why I came here. That is why I started here. And sometimes we forget that, especially when there's someone else kind of reaching out to us about a job offer. You can get them to remember why they're connected there. So this has been so much fun, so helpful. I appreciate both of you for joining us here. I'm going to make sure that your
your LinkedIn profiles are both in the comments in the chat here, so we can click over and connect with you and just tell you a thank you for sharing with us, and also just to follow you and learn more, because you're both incredibly intelligent. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it as well.
Well, to everybody else out there, hang tight for the wrap up for the day.
We are back. George is with me this time, and we're going to wrap up for the day. Just a couple quick announcements and comments and things. I'll do the official stuff, and then George, I want to ask you just for some closing thoughts of the day, if you don't mind, so you can gather your thoughts really quick. But a couple of prizes I want to give away for people that hung out with us, that shared, that made today fun. So many people have been chiming in and being a part of this today, and I thank every single one of you. If you watched this live, thank you. If you're watching this on demand, no issues at all. We appreciate you as well. So thank you all for joining us. Really quick to share. So Sherry and Jill, Kevin, the rest of your name got cut off, sir. Kevin Epley, you know who you are, and you're still here. I saw you chat a minute ago. So Kevin, Tiffany, and Sarah, all of you are going to get a prize for being engaged, for sharing with us today, for being connected. So please reach out to Melanie at upstarthr.com. She'll take care of you. We'll get you sent out the prize of your choice. Credit information will be sent out after the event, so you can get that. That will be made available to you as well. George, any closing thoughts as we get ready to wrap up, sir? Oh, and you're on mute.
Ooh.
There we go.
Hey, I want to dedicate that moment to Greg Hawks, my great friend, where we just talk and we forget that we're muted.
Yep.
No, the last couple of sessions have been great, and especially when it comes to the whole hiring process. What to look for, what do we want on our team, how are we doing those things. I just put in the chat just recently, I think it's important for teams, if you're not marketing, and I call it internal marketing, right? Your number one customer is your team. So if your business is selling something, which we all are selling and providing some type of solution to a problem or to a need, then it's everybody's responsibility. And I think it's important, number one, obviously to internal hire. I love growing from within. I don't want to bring somebody out that we're raising up. And so if I can grow within, I will. The last resort is to hire somebody from outside. But one of the things that I love about companies, if a company is recruiting me or said, hey, I know somebody jokingly may have said, maybe you wasn't joking. If you're not joking, call me. I'm always available.
You got a job offer in the chat earlier. If everybody missed that, George got a job offer in the chat earlier. So that happened.
But the companies that I want to connect with, if somebody's looking to hire me, I'm looking for people. I want to see the team, right? I should be able to go to your social media and not see some fake Photoshop Canva picture of somebody that doesn't work within your company. I want to see your sales rep. I want to see your technicians. I want to see your janitor being highlighted on why they love your company. If I can't figure out why people want to be there, it will be hard for me to figure out why I will want to be there. I am drawn. People are naturally drawn, not by what they hear, but by what they see. That's why vision is so important, right? And so it's important for us to be able to see where we are going, and be excited about those things. One of the things that I remember is a couple of years ago, this poll came out, I believe it was 2019, 73% of employees quit, right? The top 5 reasons 73% of the employees quit. The number 5 reason, which most of us always figure is number 1, was money, right? 5 was the least of the top 5 reasons, right? Number 4 was lack of appreciation. Number 3 was mismanaged. They felt like the leaders wasn't leading properly and managing properly. Number 2 was training. The number 1 reason why people quit on this poll was communication. Didn't know what I was doing, didn't know who I needed to go to. There was not internal communication, which means there's probably not great external communication. So when we're trying to hire people, you're bringing great people in to a culture where you feel like it's going well. And I always tell people, culture is not this vision and everything that you pop up. Culture really is simplified, very simple. Culture is how most people in your company feel, believe, and behave most of the time. That is your company's culture. It's not something that in lingo and model that you can put on a wall on social media to make you look like you're doing something great. Culture is how your people feel, believe, and behave. The most important, how are they acting? when you're not around, because that's true influence. That's true leadership. That's the true health of a culture, when things are still flowing and moving and improving when the leaders are not around. And so, those last couple of sessions, man, those are important factors that I hope people are encouraged by. But those are just some of the tidbits, man, that is so important to market your brand, and your brand are your people. And really let them celebrate your company. I love hearing stories of somebody that's been with a company for 6 months and they've already changed their life. Their family's more healthy. They're getting out of debt. Those are the things that you should be branding. Those are things that say, man, I want to come work for that company. If they're helping that girl out, if they're helping that man out, and those people are growing, I want to be a part of that. It's not about the money. It's about feeling connected to something that's more than just normal life.
Thank you so much for that, George. I've been telling everybody lately that, especially in the last year, I mean, always, I love this profession. I love it with a fiery passion, but especially in the last year, I can't get as excited about supply chain or about finance. When I think about HR and talent and recruiting, we get to love and support and help these people to reach whatever their dreams are. We get to play a part in that. And that's an incredible, incredible place to be. So thank you, George, to you as well. I didn't want to skip over that. Thank you for joining us today, for sharing your passion, your enthusiasm, and your incredible endless supply of one-liners. I appreciate you. Thank you again to our sponsors, Chronify, Modern Hire, for helping to make the event possible today. They've been in the chat. They've been commenting. I've seen them today. So make sure and check them out. We post some resources for each of them. Thank you to all of you as well for the amazing work you're doing, for our speakers. It's just a tremendous opportunity and an honor to be able to serve and support and to bring us all together and celebrate together this amazing profession we love, and hopefully level it up at the same time. So thank you to all of you. Appreciate you so much, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. George, appreciate you, buddy. Have a good one.
Hey, appreciate you, and thank you. We thank you, Principal Ben, for putting everything together. We appreciate you as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Take care.